Chapter 1650. Starting from the lowly county magistrate of Xiangyang district, she led people to clean up the mess, quell the chaos of the Tsing-Yi army, then annihilate the Red Lotus group and unify the entire Wanzhou. Then came the alliance meeting at Huangshui. She joined forces with the alliance to fight against the fake emperor, Prince Changshu. She led troops into Qinzhou to rescue the emperor. Her identity as a woman was exposed in court. Not only did she not lose the position of magistrate of Wanzhou because of her gender, but she used her military power to force people to recognize her as the magistrate of Wanzhou. She entered Chongzhou and sent troops to the northern borderline. Step by step, from Xiangyang district to Wanzhou, then to the overlord of the entire north. The Su brothers lost their lives in Shanqing one after another. Huang Song suffered a crushing defeat, leaving behind a grudge in Changye. Zhangjiang Pass resisted Zhongzhou's Nielyang. Zhangzhou's naval forces defeated Yang Tao. In just a few words, she described the situation of the world. Kang Xintong listened attentively. She clenched and relaxed her fists on her knees, completely ignoring the pain and itchiness of her frostbite. Lu Jing didn't expect Jiang Pengji to do so many things over the years. She talked about them one by one until his mouth was dry. She lived a life that others couldn't even dream of in 10 lifetimes. Kang Xintong said, "She's the only one in the world. I'm afraid other women won't be able to reach her in their lifetimes, that's natural. If every woman jumped up and down like Lu Shi, wishing for the world to be in chaos, how can the world be peaceful?" Lu Jing didn't expect Kang Xintong to become the second Jiang Pengji. She couldn't do that. But, don't limit your vision to stepfather. If you really want to climb higher, then set your sights higher. For example, Lu Shi. She couldn't become the second Jiang Pengji, but she could become the best version of herself. Kang Xintong hadn't met Jiang Pengji yet, but the latter had left the deepest and most colorful stroke in her heart. Her impression was deeper than anyone else's. If Wei Ci found out that Kang Xintong had been recommended by Lu Zhang and made the future Red Lotus Saintess Jiang Pengji's fan, this recommendation was too vicious. Perhaps An Shui would also doubt his life. Was Lu Zhang his advisor or a spy Jiang Pengji planted by his side? He didn't hear wrongly. The 2 malignant tumors that led the Red Lotus case that should have happened in the future had knelt. The world had just settled down, and His Majesty only had his eldest daughter, Jiang Yan. She had repeatedly wanted to make Jiang Yan the crown prince, but she was obstructed by various parties. On the surface, she was the imperial censor, but in reality, she was also interfered with by the scholars and the commoners. Everyone always said that His Majesty was still in the prime of his life and that he would live for 10,000 years in the future, so there was no hurry to appoint a crown prince. In fact, he was just stalling for time, hoping that Her Majesty would have another child, perhaps a boy. At that time, everyone would elect the prince as the heir apparent. Perhaps His Majesty would be persuaded. More than a year after the establishment of the Jiang dynasty, Her Majesty became pregnant again. The court seemed calm, but in fact, undercurrents were surging in the dark. All the forces had their own plans. Looking at it now, Wei Ci felt that Her Majesty was the one who was the most scheming, bullying her own subjects in various ways. When he was in the middle of a happy birthday, the remnants of the Red Lotus group rose from the ashes and even spread their teachings to the officials' back residences. Some people with ulterior motives had tried to use the Red Lotus group to harm Her Majesty and Jiang Yan. The Red Lotus group had also used them to open the door to infiltrate the palace and plan an assassination. The Red Lotus group was very good at picking the time. It happened to be the day when Her Majesty launched the happy birthday. Even though he later found out that this was all done on purpose by Her Majesty and that the whole situation was part of her plan to kill the disobedient people in the court, Wei Ci was still so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. This religious assassination was also known as the Red Lotus case. The leader of the Red Lotus group was the grandson of Wu Liba, the sage of the northern borderline. Of course, this fish that had escaped the net was killed by Wei Ci in advance during the Battle of the Northern Borderline. The other leader was the virgin of the Red Lotus group, a woman who used to go by the name of Kang Xintong. The remnants of the Red Lotus group were wiped out, and Kang Shintong was also caught. What shocked Wei Ci was that after this woman was caught, she almost escaped from prison. Someone helped her escape, and someone wanted her dead. After careful investigation, in a sense, Kang Shintong was a little awesome. Her Majesty, who was sitting calmly on the fishing platform, ate melon seeds and watched the show. At the same time, she threw a thick file of information about Kang Shintong. Kang Shintong was born into a noble family in Nansheng. When she was young, she and her mother were captured by the southern barbarians and suffered a lot. Because her mother covered for her, Kang Shintong struggled to grow up to the age of 13. At the age of 13, her mother died, and her identity was exposed. In order to seek a better life for herself, she had no choice but to use her beauty to seduce the leader of the southern barbarians. With the help of the leader's power, she killed the barbarians who had once taken her. After 2 years of peace, Enchanting forced the southern barbarians into a desperate situation. Before he ordered a massacre, Kang Shintong disappeared. When she reappeared several years later, she became the Virgin of the Red Lotus group, an underground cult. No one knew where Kang Shintong learned some treacherous sorcery and deceived the people. She began to infiltrate the inner residences of the officials and developed followers. Wu Liba's grandson ran the Red Lotus group and propagated its teachings. Kang Shintong used these followers to attract more people to become her subjects. Some people joined the Red Lotus group because of her beauty, while others joined because of the Red Lotus group's secret power. Like a rolling snowball, the Red Lotus group grew stronger in a short 2 or 3 years, forming a huge network of connections. Wei Ci still remembered Her Majesty's complaints. This child is so beautiful, but she ran off to engage in multi-level marketing. How stupid is she? How did Her Majesty find out about the Red Lotus group? Although the Red Lotus group had developed quite a lot, they were all operating in the dark. The court officials they had drawn in had also infiltrated from the periphery. They were very careful in their actions. Her Majesty was busy with court affairs. She had been expecting a happy birthday for the past few months. She did not have the energy to care about the Red Lotus group. Facts had proven that Her Majesty was a little monster with exuberant energy. Her plans to plot against the Red Lotus group and the restless aristocrats and commoners in the court began more than a year ago. Do you still remember your birthday last year? Wei Ci said, I remember. Her Majesty said, that day, when I went to the spring square to listen to Huanyang sing, I saw Jingtu go to the wine shop next door and get drunk. Although he looked confused, Wei Ci still listened carefully, trying to analyze the relationship between Fu Wang getting drunk and the Red Lotus group. Jingtu quarreled with his wife. Logically speaking, should not interfere in the family affairs of the officials. But since I saw it, I have to ask about it. It would not be good if serious business was delayed because of family affairs. Her Majesty looked for excuses for gossip with a serious face. After asking carefully, I found out that Jingtu's subordinate had secretly presented him with a beauty. At the same time, many unspeakable rumors reached Jingtu's wife's ears. That wife was very angry and said that she was seeking death. Although Jingtu returned the beauty, his wife was still sad. Fu Wang's wife was naturally Hui Jun in this life. Although their experiences were different, they had the same ups and downs. In the end, she became Fu Wang's wife, which caused people to talk about for a while. Because of this, Fu Wang's wife was quite low-key and almost never appeared in public. The beauty presented by his subordinate was Kang Shintong. Fu Wang refused the temptation, but his wife closed the door in his face. After getting drunk, Fu Wang complained to Her Majesty that he had been cheated by an immortal. That woman is beautiful, but my wife is not the slightest bit inferior. Am I, Fu Jingtu, the kind of person who forgets his wife when he sees love? When Her Majesty heard this, he took it seriously. Fu Wang's wife was the first lady in terms of appearance. If she was not the slightest inferior to her, the effect of bribing Fu Wang would be greatly reduced. Her Majesty went back to investigate and found out that the Red Lotus group was involved. Chapter 1651. What he said was true, but Wei Ci was not sure how true His Majesty's words were or how much he was joking. If it was in his previous life, Wei Ci would have believed it 100%. He wouldn't have dared to doubt it. In this life, the more he understood her, the more Wei Ci knew how deep her heart was hidden under her cynical appearance. He thought that Her Majesty's plan against the Red Lotus group was probably earlier than what she said. She could see through people's hearts and control the overall situation. As her enemies, they often didn't even know how they were plotted against. To be honest, it wasn't clear whether the courtiers were lucky or unlucky to have met such an emperor. Whether she was a lord or an emperor, her scheming and strategizing didn't lose out to any counselor. She didn't lose out when it came to scheming and plotting against the entire court. Sometimes Wei Ci even imagined that if it wasn't for the fact that Her Majesty's energy was limited, she might be able to carry the entire chaotic world by herself. This could be seen from the court records after the establishment of the Jiang dynasty. As the banker, she would definitely win. As someone who boasted about Her Majesty and Her Majesty, Wei Ci could boast about her even with his eyes closed. Wei Ci was Jiang Pengji's fan leader and the chief instructor of the Internet Water Army. It was normal for him to boast about Jiang Pengji, but Lu Zheng was more confused. As An Shui's counselor, Lu Zheng had unintentionally helped Jiang Pengji sell several copies. In the end, he had even turned the future leader of the Red Lotus group into a fan. That was a wonderful move. Of course, that wasn't the best part. The best part was that Kang Xintong was determined to treat Jiang Pengji as her idol for life. She wanted to be her only fan. LV Zheng smiled with relief. He was indeed Master Yuanjing's student. He was good at teaching and educating people. Wasn't this rebellious and Chinibu awakened by his strong medicine? It's good to have ambition, but you have to think clearly. No matter how high Lu she stands or how far she goes, she's a rare existence among women. She can be a role model, but you can't be too obsessed with her success. The world treats women harshly. Maybe you've worked 10 times harder to be on par with a man who has worked twice as hard. It's far from the results you expected. Lu Zheng gave Kang Xintong a heads up to prevent her from falling behind. Even so, you won't change your mind? Kang Xintong was still young and couldn't fully understand Lu Zheng's words, but she could hear how serious and solemn he was. After careful consideration, Kang Xintong nodded heavily. She didn't expect to become as powerful as her idol, but she wanted to live with dignity. Kang Xintong wanted her mother to see what was the most dignified life for a woman. May I be so bold as to ask Mr. to show me the right path and teach me how to achieve my wish? Kang Xintong bowed to Lu Zheng without saying a word. Her slightly perplexed eyes were now filled with stubbornness and pleading. LV Zheng raised his hand and pressed her shoulder. She looked at him expectantly and cautiously. Call me godfather. His own child was still crawling, so Lu Zheng planned to adopt a foster daughter to satisfy his fatherly cravings. At the same time, he could also practice and learn how to be a qualified father. Hearing Lu Zheng's words, Kang Xintong instantly understood and called out, Godfather. LV Zheng gladly agreed. Kang Xintong bowed again joyfully and said loudly, Godfather, please accept a bow from your daughter. Coincidentally, the housekeeper had already tidied up the courtyard. LV Zheng arranged for Kang Xintong to rest. He planned to think about how to carve this unpolished jade into the best work of art. He was used to staying up late, so he was still full of energy the next day. Kang Xintong, on the other hand, was a little sleepy. Everything that happened yesterday was too dreamy. She couldn't fall asleep after lying down, afraid that it would be a dream when she woke up. LV Zheng didn't suspect anything and thought that the child was unfamiliar with the bed and wasn't used to it. On this end, the newly adopted father and daughter ate breakfast together, but they didn't know that Kang Xintong's mother suffered at the same time. Her snow-white skin was left with a pair of green and red fingerprints. 2 palm prints were very swollen, and her entire face was swollen. It was as if a perfect painting had been carelessly smeared by a naughty child, losing its beauty. The person who hit her was none other than Kang Shintong's stepfather. Her stepfather was drunk last night and promised to send Kang Shintong out in a daze. When he woke up the next day, he regretted it. He had secretly coveted Kang Shintong for 2 years and originally planned to bring her in after a year. Who knew that the fruit he had been looking forward to for 2 years would be taken away by LV Zhang? He respected LV Zhang and naturally didn't dare to blame him, but his anger had to be vented. Because of this, Kang Shintong's mother suffered. Although he was an illiterate boorish man, he still had a meticulous side. With a little tidying up, he could guess who was behind this. Kang Shintong's mother was a woman he had doted on for several years. He was usually very satisfied with her, but who knew that this woman also had disloyalty? Kang Shintong had always been doing the lowliest menial work and didn't have the chance to come to the front yard, so her range of activity was limited. He didn't believe that if it wasn't for this woman's arrangement, Kang Shintong, who had always been imprisoned to do menial work, would have the chance to be taken away by LV Zhang in the front yard. In his anger, he slapped Kang Shintong's mother twice, causing her to see stars and her ears to hear the sound of a stream. "Bitch, your jealous face is really hateful." He had a murderous look on his face as if he could rush in front of her and strangle her to death in the next second. Kang Shintong's mother took a long time to recover. A bloody taste filled her mouth and her molars were loose. "Lang Jun, please forgive me. Why would I be jealous of my niece?" She endured the nausea of the world spinning and crawled to his feet. She hugged his calf and begged, "Lang Jun, you don't know. It was clearly that little bitch who heard that Master LV was a guest at your residence and had the thought of playing up to him. She put in a lot of effort to climb up to him. I'm really wronged." As she spoke, she cried as if it was really the case. The man's heart softened for a moment, but he still lifted his leg and kicked her away, leaving behind a sentence. "Lock yourself in the backyard and reflect on yourself. If there's a next time, I'll cut off your head." He had been looking forward to it for 2 years, but in the end, it was all for nothing because of a woman's jealousy. He was depressed to death. The more unobtainable something was, the more people yearned for it. He deliberately sent people to LV Zhang's residence to find out the situation. It would be best if LV Zhang took Kang Shintong as a concubine. These days, it was considered elegant to treat guests as concubines and give each other concubines. He could use a young and beautiful girl to exchange for Kang Shintong. If one was not enough, then he would get a pair. He never thought that LV Zhang would really take Kang Shintong as his adopted daughter. This adopted daughter was not a godfather and goddaughter, who hung a sheep's head and sold dog meat, but a real father and daughter. In other words, if he continued to covet Kang Shintong, he would covet LV Zhang's daughter. It was true that he cared about Kang Shintong, but he would not offend LV Zhang because of a little girl. He could only let this matter go. Chapter 1652. Jiang Pengji didn't know that Lu Zheng was diligently cultivating his loyal fans. After the new year, the originally relaxed atmosphere dissipated and was replaced by solemnity and tension. Since the assassination of the Nan family in Fenzhou, Jiang Pengji had changed so much that she was like a different person. At first, everyone was not used to it, but they got used to it after a while. Just as Wei Ci had said, their lord had grown up and become sensible. Because of Jiang Pengji's timely change, she accidentally extinguished the original hidden danger and avoided a potential crisis. As long as everyone was united, they were confident that they could tear the whole world apart, let alone Anshui. A few days after the new year, Jiang Pengji called for a meeting. The topic of the meeting was naturally how to get rid of Anshui. Yes, Jiang Pengji was pure and unpretentious. She told everyone that she had suffered a loss at Anshui's hands last year. If she didn't get back at him this year, she wouldn't be able to take it lying down. She didn't know what euphemism was. One could imagine how their lord's reputation would be if these words were recorded in the annals of history. Among everyone, only Wei Ci was worried for 3 seconds. Yang Si and the others had long given up on treatment. Whatever. Turning their heads, not only Jiang Pengji, but the others were also rubbing their fists and getting ready to do something big. If there are no objections, it's decided for now. Jiang Pengji looked around and took in everyone's expressions. After waiting quietly for a while, she repeated her question. For now, we'll send troops to conquer Anshui before the spring plowing. Does anyone have any other opinions? Regardless of whether it was Jiang Pengji or the others, most of them agreed to start the war before the spring plowing. Only a few wanted to wait until the spring plowing was over. Everyone had their own reasons. Jiang Pengji listened carefully to different voices and analyzed the pros and cons of each opinion. In the end, she decided to send troops before the spring plowing. Her decision didn't attract opposition from the officials. Instead, it caused the idle people to be puzzled. They hadn't been following the live stream for so many years for nothing. Naturally, they knew how important ancient farming was. Unless they had no other choice, both sides would wait until the spring plowing was over before starting the war. Spring plowing was too important to the ancient people who depended on the weather to make a living. Wasting a year's spring plowing was equivalent to a year's worth of food going down the drain. The probability of famine in the following year was greatly increased. Understanding this, they couldn't understand Jiang Pengji's choice. Guoli Guaduo, isn't spring plowing very important? If I remember correctly, the host was in a tight spot last year. Under such circumstances, shouldn't she place more emphasis on this year's spring plowing? If we start the war before the spring plowing, it would affect not only the enemy, but also our side. In the salted people's eyes, this choice was no different from suicide. Common people do not benefit themselves, and both sides suffer. Tudu Feichio, I'm a little confused too. I don't understand why the host is taking such a risk. And seems to have the advantage, but after careful analysis, I feel that the host still has a large chance of winning. Couldn't they fight steadily and surely? Why did they have to use such a method? Gui S, Jiang, 1, Jiang, Yang, Can, Gui Kai Guo Fengxiu, I seem to have guessed it. Host, is this related to Anshui's fortification last year? Last year, in order to make things difficult for Jiang Pengji, Anshui had deliberately given Nansheng and Xing prefectures to her. On the surface, Jiang Pengji had the upper hand. She conquered the two prefectures without much effort, but she didn't know that 70 to 80% of the grains and young men in the two prefectures had been forcibly conscripted and gathered by Anshui. And had the upper hand, leaving Jiang Pengji with two prefectures to deal with. She had to pay for nearly 1 million people's grains and winter supplies. She also had to prevent the local gentry in the two prefectures from taking the opportunity to cause trouble. Not only did it cost money, but it also took a lot of effort. What about Anshui? He had a great winter. Not only did he have a bigger purse, but he also became a father. Gui, Feng Shao, Long. Many people remembered when he mentioned this. However, what was the connection between Anshui's fortification and Jiang Pengji's abandonment of spring plowing? Naturally, there was a connection. Jiang Pengji gave up the spring plowing to attack Anshui. She only abandoned the spring plowing in Nansheng and Nanqing prefectures. The plowing in Dongqing and Beizhou, northern borderline, was not affected, but Anshui could not. He plundered a lot of grains from the two prefectures last year, but the young men he took with him had to eat too. If the spring plowing could not keep up with the harvest this year, there would definitely be a food shortage. When an army went to war, a lack of food was almost equivalent to losing half of the war. If everything went smoothly, Anshui would not last until this autumn. Jiang Pengji intended to end the war quickly. She wanted to take advantage of his weakness and kill him. After dealing with Anshui, she would turn around and take care of Zhongzhou, speeding up the pace of unifying the world. While everyone was discussing the details, Jiang Pengji briefly explained her intentions to the salted fishes. Some salted fishes were stubborn. They felt that Jiang Pengji did not need to be so anxious. Steady attacks were the way to go. Some salted fishes supported Jiang Pengji's choice unconditionally. Of course, there was a small group of salted fishes who felt that something was wrong, but they could not put their finger on it. When everyone was discussing how to distribute the troops, they were shocked to discover that Jiang Pengji was not in the starting lineup. Jiang Pengji, who had been fighting at the front lines all year round, was actually in the middle of the army. Gao Ju Punsi Shipi Daki, wait. Streamer, why aren't you at the front lines anymore? I'm not used to it. After following the live stream for so many years, their favorite segment was to see Jiang Pengji persistently wanting to go to the front lines. The civil and military officials tried their best to stop her. They had a heart attack, but they had no choice but to accept Jiang Pengji's willfulness. Such an interesting segment was gone today. Not only were the salted fishes not used to it, but Yang Saifengzhen and the others were also at a loss. They looked at Jiang Pengji, and Jiang Pengji looked back at them with a serious expression. Both parties looked at each other for more than 10 seconds. The air fell into an awkward and strange silence. Do you have any other opinions? Jiang Pengji glanced at the entire setup. There should not be any loopholes. Why did everyone look like they were stupid? Why did they not go and prepare for battle after receiving the military order? Why were they here staring at her? My lord, did you miss something? Li Yun asked cautiously. What did I miss? I didn't miss anything. What did I miss? Jiang Pengji looked puzzled. Fu Wang suddenly coughed awkwardly. He cupped his fists and bade farewell. Time to go, time to go. Fu Wang left. As if awakened from a dream, the others got up in twos and threes. After leaving the main tent, Li Yun still had a dreamy look on his face. My lord has really turned over a new leaf? Bah, what do you mean by turning over a new leaf? Isn't this pretty good? Go and do what you have to do. Yang Si slapped Li Yun's shoulder, interrupting him to prevent him from saying something even more appalling and stupid. My lord's ears are very sharp. Li Yun nodded repeatedly and left in a hurry, as if there was a monster chasing him from behind. Jiang Pengji. Chapter 1653. Did these people think she was deaf? If they really wanted to make things up behind her back, they could at least do it from a distance. At such a close distance, what was the difference between that and making things up in front of her? Yang Si and the others are becoming more and more like princesses. They're super hard to please. Jiang Pengji couldn't help but shake her head. She had a helpless but doting expression. In the past, she always wanted to lead the vanguard troops and wanted to use herself as a general. They tried their best to stop her, almost crying and hanging themselves. When they couldn't stop them, they would show a wronged and helpless expression, making people feel guilty for no reason. Now that she had learned from her painful experience, she planned to make a fundamental change. Even honest people like Li Yun couldn't get used to it. It made it seem like it was her fault from the beginning to the end. Jiang Pengji felt wronged, but she didn't say it. Because all the officials had retreated, they didn't know that they were being blamed by their lord. Instead, it was the salted fish who felt it was unfair for them. Listen to what Jiang Pengji said. Sure Ingchan, I can see that the streamer really doesn't know what's going on. Bao Xian, the little princess is the one who feels wronged. Doesn't your conscience hurt when you say that? Sitting on the grave and enjoying the moon, oh, the streamer is a big pig trotter. She really should let little Rong Rong and the rest come back to listen to her and see her true colors. They are the ones who should feel wronged, okay? Shui Shuch was Hong's hoodie. Previously, people told me that the streamer has changed. I didn't believe it, but I didn't expect it to be true. Anyone who had some understanding of the streaming room knew Jiang Pengji's bad temper. As the saying goes, it's easy to change mountains and rivers, but hard to change a person's nature. It was quite torturous to let an unrestrained person who loved freedom be confined to the rear and watch others do as they pleased. The salted fish always thought that being diligent was her limit. When there was a war, she would definitely show her true colors. Who knew that she had really changed? She didn't even play in her favorite battlefield. You Abba, don't you feel uncomfortable watching this? Jiang Pengji said, I don't feel uncomfortable, I'm just not used to it. The 7th Corps was the Federation's first line of defense against the enemy. It was the sharpest knife. It was dispatched to wherever there was war. Even if she didn't like war, she had gotten used to it after so many years. Fighting was as common as eating and drinking to her. To have a person like her, who was born to fight, retreat to the rear and watch others rush to the battlefield, facing dangers that she didn't know if she would survive or not. She, who had combat strength, couldn't personally kill the enemy. Instead, she had to suppress the restless bloodthirst in her body. No matter how she looked at it, she wasn't used to it. However, even if he was not used to it, he had to get used to it. Jiang Pengji took a deep breath and suppressed that feeling. Your Abba, you'll have to get used to it sooner or later. Speaking of which, aren't you worried that something will happen to them on the battlefield? The old chief knew what kind of person Jiang Pengji was. She loved the battlefield. Other than the bloodthirst in her bones, it was mostly for the sake of others. The more enemies she killed, the fewer enemies the others had to face. Naturally, the pressure on them would lessen. Of course, she couldn't say these mushy words out loud. Outsiders could only experience it for themselves. As expected, Jiang Pengji denied it. Why should I worry about them? They're not 3-year-old kids. They don't need me to look after them on the battlefield. A general is a profession where one's head is tied to one's belt. If they're afraid of death, they won't be able to make a living, Jiang Pengji said. Worry? There's no shadow of it. Your Abba, a woman who says one thing but means another. Jiang Pengji didn't think that she was saying one thing but meant one thing. There was no one else in the world who was more consistent than her. I, Jiang Pengji, have never been a hypocrite. I say whatever I want to say. She said it righteously and sternly. The old chief coldly replied with 2 words, haha. The old chief is a decent person. Don't learn bad things from the group of salted fish in the streaming room. You should be dignified and dignified. Under the scourge of 5 million salted fish, Jiang Pengji couldn't look directly at those 2 words. Because behind every haha was, I bought a watch last year. Seeing the sarcastic haha, she knew that the old chief had learned a lot from the streaming room. Was his life so leisurely after retirement? Your Abba, then I'll say something else, Jiang Xiaozhou. I advise you to have some sense of propriety. Jiang Pengji, at the end of the meeting, the starting lineup for the match against Enchanting was basically confirmed. Apart from a few familiar faces, Jiang Pengji also promoted a few young faces. However, newcomers meant that they were young and inexperienced. It was easy for them to be taken advantage of when they met with veterans on the battlefield. Under normal circumstances, many people preferred to use experienced or capable veterans. For new generals, unless they had outstanding military exploits or impressive combat abilities, they had to wait for a few years. It was rare for Jiang Pengji to promote newcomers as frequently as she did. Why? Previously, she was short of people and had to promote newcomers. Now that she's not short of people, shouldn't she prioritize safety? Could it be that she's still guarding against us? Yang Tao rarely came up with a conspiracy theory, but his conjecture was so crude that it made people speechless. It doesn't seem like it. Even though we haven't had much contact, based on our observations these days, Lu Lanting isn't a two-faced villain. If Jiang Pengji was the kind of villain who said she would promote people to important positions but secretly schemed against them, Yang Tao wouldn't have such a good impression of her. It's not about the lack of people. Yan Lin wanted to explain, but seeing that Yang Tao was confused, he gave a simple example. If Zhengzhou was a talented general who had been suppressed for many years and had no hope of being promoted, what would you think? After a long time, even if you don't resent him, you'll lose the will to improve. You'll either be depressed and resentful of the world, or completely dispirited and muddle along. If the enemy sent someone to instigate a rebellion and gave them a bright future, very few people wouldn't be tempted. Lu Lanting boldly promoted newcomers and gave them a chance to be promoted. Not only could she nurture young talents, but it was also a way for her to win people's hearts. That's why there's less infighting under Lu Lanting's banner. Most infighting in the world was due to political views, while the rest was due to conflicts of interest. In other words, there were too many monks and too little porridge. With so many monks trying to snatch the same bowl of porridge, they got angry and naturally started fighting over it. How could this conflict be resolved? Most of the feudal lords tried to mediate between the two monks. They tried to persuade one monk to live harmoniously and the other monk to focus on the bigger picture. There was no solution to the question of who should get the bowl of porridge. This method was to smooth things over. In the end, the fight would still be fought. Jiang Pengji was different. When others fought over a bowl of porridge, she did not step forward to mediate. Instead, she took out a few steamed buns. Even though it was risky, Yan Lin thought it was a good way to solve the root of the problem. I see. Chapter 1654. It was still a chilly spring, and the snow had just melted. The air was filled with a cold chill. However, the coolness of the outside world could not cool down Enchanting's rising fury. No one expected that Jiang Pengji would use a method that harmed others without benefiting herself. There was still half a month before the spring plowing. This made Enchanting wonder if the other party had gone mad, to be so hot-tempered. Even a war had to be fought according to the basic laws. Jiang Pengji actually destroyed the spring plowing. Was she planning to fly into the sky? It was common knowledge that spring plowing was the first major event of the year. And Shui had sent people to prepare early on, expending a lot of manpower and resources. As long as this year's harvest was good and there was enough food, Jiang Pengji had nothing to fear. He had never expected that she would play her cards so unconventionally. She would risk her own spring plowing to attack Enchanting. By now, she had already crossed the river and torn down Enchanting's fence. When Enchanting heard the news in the morning, her happiness from the new year was washed away. When did this happen? Why did you only report it now? And couldn't help but ask again, thinking that she was hallucinating. The soldier who delivered the message repeated nervously, "My lord, 3 days ago, Lu Shi's troops attacked our border town and forced their way across the Biling River. It happened so suddenly that the defending general was patrolling outside and carelessly let the enemy take advantage of a loophole. In the end, he had no choice but to retreat 30 miles. And Shui heard it clearly now, and his face turned green. Biling River was a river that lay between Jiang Pengji and Enchanting. The surface of the river was 7 miles long, which was about 3,500 meters. This river was also one of the main streams of water in Nanxing. It irrigated both sides of the river and fed countless people. Because the soil here was fertile and easy to water, coupled with the fact that Nanxing was located in the south, the climate was humid, and they could harvest crops twice a year. And Shui still hoped that this place could alleviate the food shortage and give him the capital to fight Jiang Pengji for a long time. He never expected that Jiang Pengji would suddenly make things difficult for him. Not only did she disrupt the spring plowing, but she also seized this piece of fat meat. And Shui was slapped awake by reality. His face was ashen, and 2 flames of anger danced in the depths of his eyes, as if he wanted to burn everything he saw. In his anger, Shui used his sleeve to sweep away all the things piled up on the table, causing them to crash to the ground. Everyone heard the news and rushed over, just in time to see it. No one dared to provoke her at this time. They could only secretly glance at Hua Yuan, hoping that he would say something to appease them. Hua Yuan did not let them down. He stepped forward and bowed. "My lord, please calm down." And Shui said, "How can I calm my anger? Do you know what Lu Shi did? She's crazy." Hua Yuan naturally knew what had happened. Otherwise, he would not have been called over. Things have already been decided. No matter how angry my lord is, it doesn't change anything. For now, the most important thing is to think of a way to deal with Lu Shi's army. At the same time, we need to hold the defending general accountable for his negligence. Hua Yuan's light words had changed the subject. and Shui had nowhere to vent his anger. The others in the tent felt a chill run down their spines when they heard this. Why? According to the content of the battle report, the defending general did not neglect his duty at all. Jiang Pengji sent a large number of troops to attack the place, and the defending general could not defend it no matter how hard he tried. Furthermore, the two sides of the Bailing River were wide open, and there were basically no guarded passes. Jiang Pengji was also an expert in land warfare. The Steel Horsemen under her command had even defeated the 3 tribes of the northern borderline who had once dominated the grasslands of the northern borderline. How could a mere 20 to 30,000 soldiers trip her up? It was the biggest joke in the world. Hua Yuan's way of changing the subject had calmed in Shui's anger, but it had also brought an undeserved disaster to the defending general. And Shui calmed down a little. Panting heavily, he asked, "Do you have a good plan?" "I'm incompetent. I can't share my lord's burden." Hua Yuan blamed himself, then changed the topic and shifted the blame. Hearing this, everyone secretly cursed him for being cunning. He said, "But my lord has a lot of talented people under your command. You can gather everyone's wisdom and strength to come up with a countermeasure." And Shui glanced at the hesitant officials around him. His mood, which had just improved, fell again. Apart from Hua Yuan, the others were like good-for-nothings who could not do anything. They were like worms who ate the Lord's salary but could not share his burden. From the moment they entered until now, apart from Hua Yuan who dared to speak in spite of his anger, the others were like mutes, not uttering a single word. Therefore, although Hua Yuan did not come up with a plan, and Shui was even more satisfied with him. He even sighed in his heart that Hua Yuan was the most loyal and devoted person in the world. Lu Zheng. Lu Zheng's presence was getting weaker and weaker. He had been in the background during the new year. How could Shui think of him? Everyone had been forced to do something beyond their abilities by Hua Yuan. After offering their suggestions, they did not get anything out of it, because Shui only cared about Hua Yuan. After they dispersed, everyone left the main tent in 2s and 3s, intentionally or unintentionally isolating Hua Yuan. There was something strange about this matter. Although Hua Yuan had made many contributions, in terms of weight, Lu Zheng was clearly more important. In the end, his lord Shui seemed to have taken the wrong medicine and trusted Hua Yuan wholeheartedly. Especially after the new year, he almost wanted to worship Hua Yuan. From time to time, he would talk to him by candlelight, and the two of them would sleep together. Even Lu Zheng had not valued him this much back then. There were even people who disliked Hua Yuan who mocked him behind his back. Hua Yuan was not the number 1 strategist in Shui's tent at all. He was clearly the number 1 strategist in someone else's tent. Of course, these words would not reach Hua Yuan's ears. They had all seen this man's cruelty. How would they dare to rush to their deaths? On the other hand, Lu Zheng, speaking of which, they had not seen Lu Zheng for a long time. He did not appear even after such a huge incident had happened today. What was Lu Zheng doing? Some people said that his heart had been hurt by Shui. Now that he had been frozen, he was disheartened and staying at home. Some people said that Lu Zheng had been suppressed by Hua Yuan and had fallen into depravity because he was bored. He was addicted to women and could not extricate himself. No one knew that Lu Zheng was addicted to his daughter and had no heart for proper business. In fact, before Jiang Pengji's troops had forcefully crossed Bailing River, he had a premonition. Outsiders did not understand her, but Lu Zheng knew her temperament. It was not difficult to deduce her actions based on her temperament and style. When the incident at Bailing River came, Lu Zheng's first reaction was to frown. Something was wrong, he could deduce this even when he was at home. There was no reason that Hua Yuan did not know about the mental illness. If he knew, why did he not warn Shui in advance and send troops to guard against it? Lu Zheng felt uncomfortable all over when he thought of that lunatic Hua Yuan. Carry it first. Come back in 2 hours for a spot check. Lu Zheng assigned the homework casually and strode away. Kang Shintong held the heavy bamboo slips and recited them loudly without any complaints. Kang Shintong was born into an aristocratic family. Her biological father had also hired a teacher to teach her. This helped her build a solid foundation, so she learned quickly. Compared to Kang Shintong's enthusiasm for learning, Lu Jing did not have much energy in the following half a month. He even missed his lectures. Kang Shintong asked with concern, "What's wrong, godfather? Could it be that something troublesome has happened to you?" Lu Jing frowned and said, "The situation at the front line worries me. Hua Yuan seemed to have taken the wrong medicine again. Recently, he had been working but not putting in any effort. He had been slacking all day." Even Lu Jing could see his problem, but he pretended to be deaf and mute and chose to stand by. This abnormality made Lu Jing tense up. Chapter 1655. Compared to Lu Zheng's heaviness and worry, Kang Shintong's voice was much livelier. "I happened to overhear it. I heard that the Duke of Lanting's morale is very high." Lu Zheng glanced at his adopted daughter indifferently and raised his hand to smack her forehead, telling her to watch her words. Kang Shintong was his adopted daughter after all. Why was she so excited when the enemy was mentioned? People who did not know better would think that Kang Shintong was Jiang Pengji's daughter. Kang Shintong's lips curled into a pretty smile. She was not afraid of Lu Zheng's warning at all. Perhaps it was because she had been eating and sleeping well these days. Her originally thin chin had become rounder. She looked more and more likable. Seeing her smile, Lu Jing felt gratified and frowned at the same time. Even though he fed Kang Shintong chicken soup and told her that looks were innate and not to care too much, the reality was that reality had a natural malice towards good-looking women, especially in troubled times. A gentleman will not be imposing if he is not serious. No matter when, where, and who you are facing, you have to control your emotions. You can't be brash and give people the impression that you are frivolous and rude. Lu Zheng taught his adopted daughter seriously. He sounded righteous and strict, but in fact, he had a lot of personal opinions. Kang Shintong looked like she was being taught, but she did not take it to heart. She had only smiled at her foster father just now. How was that frivolous, impolite, and reckless? Besides, father, a gentleman will not be imposing if he is not serious. Is this from the Analects of Confucius? Kang Shintong did have some basic knowledge, but the Analects of Confucius was too profound for her back then. The teacher that her parents hired had not even taught her that much. Recently, Lu Jing grabbed her to revise the Analects of Confucius, but Kang Shintong was still at the stage of rote memorization. Lu Jing said, "A gentleman will not be imposing if he is not serious. He will not be firm if he learns." The meaning of this sentence could be understood literally, but Kang Shintong, who had always been intelligent, was surprised. Lu Jing thought she did not understand and asked, "What do you not understand?" "Feel free to ask." Kang Shintong took out a roll of bamboo slips and opened it for Lu Jing to see. She pointed at the sentence on the bamboo slips. "According to my adoptive father, a gentleman will not be imposing if he is not serious." Serious means sincere and solemn, but the note on the bamboo slips is not. Notes. The bamboo slips of the Analects of Confucius that Kang Shintong was currently using were the ones he had used when he was still a student. He had memorized every word on it by heart, so there was no need for him to flip through the bamboo slips again and again. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to teach Kang Shintong the Analects of Confucius, he wouldn't have taken out these bamboo slips. Although he hadn't read it for many years, he didn't remember what he had written on it. Bamboo slips were different from other materials. It was inconvenient to engrave words on them, and if one engraved too many words, it would shorten the lifespan of the bamboo slip. Because of his excellent memory, Lu Jing rarely engraved any annotations on it. He curiously took the bamboo slip from Kang Shintong's hand and opened it to take a look. He discovered that the words "a gentleman who is not heavy will not be imposing" next to the words "petty bourgeois." The heavier one was, the fatter one was. Lu Jing, in other words, according to the explanation, the meaning of this sentence was twisted into, "If a gentleman is not fat, he is not dignified enough." Which bastard carved words on his bamboo slips? It was one thing to carve words, but wasn't he afraid that the saint wouldn't be able to hold him down if he explained it to the saint? Godfather, this annotation. Kang Shintong muttered softly, was it carved by Godfather? Lu Jing glanced at the handwriting and realized that it was somewhat familiar. He stared at it again and remembered who it was. No, it's impossible. Lu Jing denied it thrice. Kang Shintong knew how precious books were. Her godfather didn't come from a good family background, so he should cherish it more. If the person who engraved the words was not someone he trusted, he wouldn't have the chance to create trouble on it. Therefore, she was curious. Which deity had made such annotations? Who was it? Lu Jing threw the bamboo slip on the table and curled his lips. Who else could it be other than that foppish Lu Shi? That's right, the annotations were left behind by Jiang Pengji. Lu Jing didn't know the specific time, but it was most likely before he left Langya County. Kang Shintong's little mouth opened slightly. She was stunned for a while, then she suddenly burst into laughter. The Duke of Lanting actually had such a cute and mischievous side when he was young. The expressionless Lu Jing, shouldn't a normal person's first reaction upon seeing such a ridiculous annotation be to say that Jiang Pengji was a bad student? But the person? Mischievous? What kind of description was that? She wasn't a fan filter. She was obviously blind. Lu Jing suddenly felt a little remorseful. Did he overcorrect his goddaughter? She was his goddaughter, but she was a fan of Jiang Pengji. That was too much. Humph. Lu Jing snorted in disdain. He took out a knife and a brush from his sleeve, ready to scrape away the nonsense Jiang Pengji had left behind. Unexpectedly, Kang Shintong refused. She grabbed the bamboo slip and hugged it in her arms. Her face was full of expectation, and her eyes were pleading. Let me translate, these were the words personally engraved by her idol. She had to keep them and not scrape them off. Lu Jing held the knife and brush in his hand. He didn't know whether to take them or put them away. Kang Shintong took advantage of Lu Jing's hesitation and hid the bamboo slip behind her. She changed the topic abruptly. Godfather, the situation at the front line isn't optimistic. Don't the others have any countermeasures? Lu Jing was silent for a while. He quietly put away the knife and brush and resumed his serious expression. There are countermeasures. Although the people under the Lord's command have their own agendas, not all of them are mediocre. If that's the case, why are you so worried? If they have countermeasures, they naturally have the ability to solve it. Kang Shintong spoke rather bluntly. She had been with Lu Jing for a long time and had a deeper understanding of him. This godfather was good in every way, but Enchui had eyes but failed to see and sheltered him. Why didn't Enchui think about how her godfather had accompanied him through his lowest times? What was the difference between him and a scumbag who abandoned his wife when he struck it rich? Trash. Pig trotters. Kang Shintong didn't like Enchui. She couldn't wait for him to die. Lu Jing said, I'm afraid that someone has the ambition of a wolf. I don't know what evil plans they have in the dark. Kang Shintong didn't understand. Will the people under Lord Enchui's command harm him? Lu Jing sneered. Why not? Some people have lost their minds and gone mad. They can't be treated as normal people. If that's the case, will you remind Lord Enchui? Kang Shintong asked carefully. Lu Jing sneered. Remind? Ha! It was useless to remind him. Lu Jing wasn't someone who liked to pester others. He was already disgusted by Enchui's repeated suicidal acts. 2 days after this conversation, Enchui gathered the army and prepared to set off. Lu Jing, the background, was dragged along as well. Enchui thought of Lu Jing, not because he still had a conscience and cherished old friendships, but because of Hua Yuan's recommendation. No scumbag would think of himself as scumbag, much less think that neglecting someone else was his fault. What else could Lu Zheng be dissatisfied with if Shui was willing to put Lu Zheng in an important position again? In order to maintain the scumbag mentality, Shui had planned to have Lu Zheng guard the rear. In the end, this decision was sternly rejected by Hua Yuan. For Shui to leave a great talent like Lu Zheng behind in the rear was simply a reckless waste of God's gift. What does Hua Yuan want to do? What does he want to do? Hua Yuan sneered. Chapter 1656. Is Godfather going to follow the army into battle? Kang Xintong had been living in Lu Zheng's residence for a while now, and their relationship had improved by leaps and bounds. When she saw Lu Zheng instruct the housekeeper to pack his luggage with a grave expression, she knew that something had happened outside. She heard that the front line was extremely dangerous, and her godfather had been neglected by Shui for a long time. She didn't know why he was suddenly put in an important position. Hua Yuan recommended me to the Lord, so she ordered me to follow the army into battle. Stay at home and wait for me to return. You mustn't neglect your studies when I'm not home. You'll be tested when I return. Lu Zheng didn't have experience as a teacher, but he had experience as a student. His master, Master Yuanjing, had taught his students in the same way back then. There was a limit to how much he could relax. Even though Kang Xintong was a self-disciplined, studious, and practical child, she was still a teenager. Her self-control wasn't as good as an adult's, and it was easy for her to be distracted by the flowers and plants of the outside world. Lu Zheng was worried that Kang Xintong would neglect her studies when he wasn't around. I will remember Godfather's teachings. Kang Xintong agreed, but she asked in confusion, it's a good thing that Lord Shui put you in an important position again. Why does Godfather look so preoccupied? Is it because of Master Hua Yuan's recommendation? She had vaguely heard servants mention that her godfather and Hua Yuan didn't get along. However, her godfather didn't admit it himself, so Kang Xintong couldn't discuss it in private. I have some conflicts with him, and we've never been on good terms. Lu Zheng didn't avoid the topic and said directly, as the saying goes, there must be something wrong when something is out of the ordinary. He's not a kind-hearted person. Who knew if his expression of goodwill was genuine or just another scheme? I'm worried that he's up to something again, so I have to be on guard. However, the Lord trusts him so much that I can't do anything to him. The conflict between Hua Yuan and Lu Zheng was well known. He had been suppressing Lu Zheng both openly and secretly, so how could he give him a chance to turn things around? He was afraid that there was some kind of conspiracy, such as luring the tiger away from the mountain and taking advantage of LV Zheng going to the front line to stir up trouble in the rear, or that there was some kind of trap waiting for LV Zheng to jump into at the front line, or that there was some kind of conspiracy at the front line. All of these were possible. Even though LV Zheng's suspicions were very reasonable and well-founded, it also proved one thing: Hua Yuan, a dangerous individual with a split personality, had left a deep psychological shadow on him, so much so that LV Zheng was a little paranoid and always had a conspiracy theory about everything. When Kang Xintong heard this, she had a bold idea. Your daughter has a matter that I hope Godfather will agree to. She swallowed nervously and said tentatively, it's already unfilial of me to not share my father's burden when he's with the army. I don't dare to let him worry about me when he's at the front. If that's the case, why don't you? Under Lu Zheng's stern gaze, Kang Xintong's voice gradually became softer and softer until it could not be heard. Her little head also drooped down. Why not what? Why didn't you say anything? Lu Zheng asked with a spurious smile. His eyes that seemed to be able to see through one's heart were filled with understanding. You don't dare to say it? Then let me guess and see if I've guessed what you're thinking. Do you want to follow the army to the front? Even if Kang Xintong's idol was Jiang Pengji, he couldn't be so bold if he wanted to imitate his idol, could he? Jiang Pengji had a sizable female battalion under her command. Over the years, they had risen to fame and made a name for themselves, making their enemies tremble in fear. However, Shui did not have such conditions. Kang Xintong was a girl. If LV Zheng did not take good care of her, who knew when something would happen to her? The front line was full of swords and sabers. It was too dangerous. I advise you to give up on this idea as soon as possible. LV Zheng quite liked this clever and obedient adopted daughter. How could he bear to let her go to the front line and court death? At the end of the day, it was Lu Lanting's fault. He did not teach good things and taught bad things to children. LV Zheng smiled in his heart and patted the little man. The two words, Lu Shi, were written on the man's body. His black resentment was almost overflowing. Her foster father's rejection was within Kang Xintong's expectations. She gave a fawning smile, got up from the mat, and went behind LV Zheng. She rubbed his shoulders attentively and said softly, "Foster father, you are indeed my foster father. I can't hide my cleverness from you." Humph, carrot, it was useless even if the little girl had a sweet mouth. LV Zheng did not fall for it verbally, but he enjoyed it in his heart. The front line is very dangerous. There's chaos everywhere. If you're not careful, you'll lose your life. It's for your own good that I'm not letting you go. Moreover, the army camp is not as simple as you think. There are a bunch of rough and barbaric men there. I dare not guarantee your safety. You're a delicate girl. You'll easily get into trouble if you go. LV Zheng tried to dispel her thoughts. His idol was so arrogant because he had the ability to survive at the front line. That person could enter an army of thousands without batting an eyelid. She did not have the ability to do so, so she did not want to die. Of course, Kang Xintong's courage was worthy of recognition. Ordinary girls would not have the courage to say that they wanted to go to the front line. Kang Xintong's expression darkened when LV Zheng saw through her thoughts. She immediately became determined and her eyes were filled with determination. She really wanted to go to the front line. How could she grow faster by staying in the rear and enjoying the protection of a greenhouse? She was not afraid even if she might face the dangers that LV Zheng mentioned. She also wanted to see how big the world was as LV Zheng had said. She immediately begged LV Zheng, "Godfather, you're always thinking of me. I'm afraid that I'll let you down. What's so good about the front line that it's worth all of you going there? Don't you know that people will die? Other than me, there's someone else like you?" LV Zheng said, "Isn't Lu Shi the one who taught you bad things?" "Humph, the culprit of all conflicts." Kang Xintong said seriously, "Godfather, I've always remembered what you told me. However, reading 10,000 books is not as good as walking 10,000 miles. No matter how much I read, it's still not as good as seeing with my own eyes. I'm short-sighted, so I naturally have to see more." LV Zheng sighed helplessly. He raised his hand and pulled Kang Xintong up, making her kneel on the ground look unbecoming. "You can go, but you have to promise me that your own safety is the most important." If she went to the front line, LV Zheng could not guarantee Kang Xintong's safety. Whether it was a blessing or a curse, she would have to bear it herself. Since Kang Xintong was so persistent, LV Zheng could not force her. Of course, if his own flesh and blood disobeyed him like this, he would probably explode and break their legs. Kang Xintong did not expect LV Zheng to be so easy to talk to. She was already prepared to be rejected for the second time. Thus, when LV Zheng agreed, she almost did not react in time. When she came back to her senses, she quickly said, "Thank you, Godfather." Chapter 1657. Lu Zheng made it sound serious, but in fact, it was not that dangerous. Kang Xintong was young to begin with, so it was not out of place for her to disguise as a man. Lu Zheng also ordered people to keep an eye on her at all times. As long as Kang Xintong did not seek death and go to places she should not go, she would not be in any danger in the military camp. Unless the enemy directly launched a sneak attack on our camp, then there was nothing we could do. Moreover, Lu Zheng was a strategist, not a general. He spent most of his time in the barracks, so he could definitely protect this little girl. Lu Zheng did not hide Kang Xintong's matter from Enchanting and informed him in advance. Enchanting had vaguely heard that Lu Zheng had adopted a daughter, but he did not expect that he would bring her to the military camp. Take it with you, as long as it doesn't interfere with important matters. And Shui had no objections, so the matter was settled. The army set off. Lu Jing followed in Shui on horseback, but Hua Yuan was nowhere to be seen. Seeing this, Lu Jing felt even more uneasy. He pretended to casually ask the people around him about Hua Yuan's whereabouts. "Why don't I see Hua Yuan?" Lu Jing whispered to a strategist he was on good terms with. His eyes were still wandering around, trying to find a familiar figure. He said, "The Lord can't leave the flower abyss. He can't wait to take her wherever he goes. Why can't I see her today?" The other party asked, "You don't know?" Lu Jing shook his head. "I really don't know." The other party continued, "This time, the enemy is coming in full force, but Lu Shi still sent out his troops despite the spring plowing. It's obvious that he's made up his mind. If we want to defend against the enemy, we don't know how long this battle will take. I'm afraid we won't have enough rations. The Lord has sent Hua Yuan to collect military provisions and supplies." Lu Zheng's heart skipped a beat. Is there not enough food? How much rations do we have? How long can it support the army? Lu Zheng had gradually become disconnected from political affairs during his time in the cold. His understanding of the military camp had fallen behind. Roughly speaking, we should be able to last until early winter. Why is it only early winter? According to Lu Zheng's estimation, the provisions they had in reserve could last them until the end of spring and the beginning of summer next year. Of course, it wouldn't matter even if he couldn't hold on. Rations were precious in any period of time, not to mention in this chaotic world where rations were the hard currency. If there really was a food shortage, not only would they have to think of ways to increase income, but they would also have to do their best to reduce expenditure. If there was no other choice, then he could only use special methods to get through this difficult period of time. Even so, Lu Jing still felt that Shui and Hua Yuan were too wasteful. During the days when he was frozen, the two of them were quite extravagant. They were like the foolish sons of a landlord. The more foolish people have, the faster the money comes. The foundation that Lu Zheng had accumulated over the years was going to be destroyed by them. He had a rough idea in his heart, but he didn't expect the truth to be worlds apart from his conjecture. We should have been able to last longer. After all, our army benefited a lot from the incident last year. But, all these years, Lu Shi had swept through the lands. Hadn't he relied on the elites under his command? Now that the army was at the borders, the Lord was extremely fearful of her. She was afraid that the army would not be strong enough, so she had been recruiting soldiers and training elites. Last year, the Lord sent people to select 150,000 strong youths from the two prefectures and send them to the military camp. 150,000? Lu Zheng's voice almost cracked. Was he hallucinating? Are you sure it's 150,000 and not 15,000? This is simply nonsense. Lu Zheng didn't care that Shui was not far away. He widened his eyes and scolded them. Not only were Shui and Hua Yuan prodigal sons, but they were also kicked in the head by a donkey? How could there be such a good thing in this world? One wanted the horse to run fast, but also wanted the horse to eat less and drink less? These youths were all mouths that were crying piteously for food. They ate grains. They were neither wooden oxen nor immortals. They couldn't eat wind and drink dew. If they were trained as elites, their daily meals would be at least twice as much as that of ordinary soldiers. There were so many mouths to feed all of a sudden. Did Shui really think that food didn't need money? The incident last year that he mentioned was referring to the incident where Shui fortified the walls and cleared the fields to trick Jiang Pengji last year. He took all the benefits for himself and plundered the food reserves of the two prefectures. In the end, he threw a group of old, weak, sick, and disabled people to Jiang Pengji and made her worry about food. In Lu Zheng's opinion, Shui shouldn't have wanted those youths last year. It would have been enough to just plunder the food reserves. He should have thrown the youths, the weak, the sick, and the disabled to Jiang Pengji, making her worry about food. If she could solve it, she would be considered capable. If she couldn't, she could send someone to secretly instigate the youths to revolt and attack the granary to snatch food. It would also be a good opportunity for Lu Zheng to see Jiang Pengji being pressured into a terrible state. It was a pity that Shui refused to listen. He had already been bewitched by Hua Yuan, the little b******. 150,000 more mouths to feed out of thin air. How will there be enough food for our army? Shui had previously annexed the various feudal lords of Nansheng and absorbed their military forces. The number of troops under his command was already very large. The youths from the two prefectures that had just been absorbed had no combat experience. They were only there to wave the flag and shout battle cries, and at the same time, they were also there to give the enemy heads and experience. However, Hua Yuan wanted to challenge Lu Zheng to a duel. Due to various disadvantages, Lu Zheng couldn't defeat him. His master, Shui, was also greedy and couldn't bear to part with the youths. He was afraid that these youths would become Jiang Pengji's daggers against him, so he insisted on taking them home and digesting them himself. Look, now you know the consequences of being too greedy and inconsiderate, right? You've lifted a rock and dropped it on your own feet. Lu Zheng felt a little stuffy in his chest, as if someone had stabbed him with a knife. His lord, Shui, used to be so reliable. Why did he become so arrogant after he became rich? He could be arrogant if he wanted to, but he should at least wait until the dust settled on the enemy, right? The enemy hadn't even knelt down, yet he was the first to lose his cool. Was he planning to give his head to Jiang Pengji? Lu Zheng cursed in his heart, but he didn't know if he should say it. Lower your voice. Do you want to die? The man tugged at Lu Zheng's sleeve and warned him in a low voice. He secretly raised his head and glanced in Shui's direction. He realized that Shui was looking in his direction. His pitch-black eyes were devoid of any emotion. Under such a gaze, he couldn't help but shiver. He quickly lowered his head to avoid eye contact. Lu Zheng tightened his grip on the reins and snorted coldly in a low voice. It's time for you to change your personality. It's not like you don't know the Lord's temperament. If you insist on being stubborn, you'll be the one who suffers. The onlooker sees the game more clearly than the person directly involved. Why was Shui close to Hua Yuan and distant from Lu Zheng? It wasn't because Lu Zheng wasn't capable enough. It was clearly because Lu Zheng's temperament had made his lord, Shui, unhappy for a long time. He felt that Lu Zheng might be put in a difficult position again. As it turned out, Shui wasn't as petty as he thought. Indeed, he didn't like Lu Zheng, but he wouldn't ignore the bigger picture and leave such a capable person like Lu Zheng to rot in a corner. Now was the time to use people. Lu Zheng still had to use him when he needed to. Chapter 1658. It was the 6th year of Taikang. It was a chilly spring. Spring had arrived in the south of Yonghua, but the northern border was still snowing. The snow was up to his ankles. Nianyang thought that after death, his soul would return to the netherworld. He would walk on the bridge of helplessness, drink Meng Po's soup, forget the past, and be reborn. In the end, he was still too young. Nianyang was the legitimate son of the Nia family's third branch. Although he was not valued by his elders, he was well-dressed and had never suffered. He was sent to Jiang Pengji by Nia Qing to die. He only had time to say his last words before he was decapitated. He felt a chill on his neck. After some time, he regained consciousness. Not only was his neck cold, but his limbs were even colder. It was as if he was in an ice cave. He struggled to open his eyes and saw the broken roof of the house. When he turned his eyes, he saw that the room was pitch black. Nianyang was shocked. He was surprised that hell was like this. He used all his strength to push himself up from the bed. He was shocked. Underneath him was a bed made of dried grass and firewood. His body was covered with something black and smelly. His hands, which were exposed from his sleeves, were cracked and frostbitten. Not only that, but he also found that his feet were bare. His ankles and soles were blue from the cold. Could it be that Lord Lanting was so stingy that he didn't even leave clothes for me? Nia Yang murmured. As soon as he said it, he was shocked by his own voice. In his previous life, Nia Yang's voice was not as elegant as Nia Qing's, but it was full of youthful vigor. What about now? He sounded like he was about 6 or 7 years old. Although his voice was hoarse, it could not hide his childishness. At that moment, Nia Yang realized that his limbs had shrunk. He used all his strength to get up. From the corner of his eyes, he saw white snow outside the broken window. He could vaguely see well-dressed people walking by. Nia Yang was at a loss for a while. He panicked and realized that the situation was different from what he had imagined. Could it be, this isn't hell? When Nia Yang tried to go out, he felt a sharp pain in his head. An unfamiliar and slightly blurry memory filled his brain. It really isn't hell. After a long while, Nia Yang revealed a shocked and panicked expression. He looked like he was about to cry, but he wasn't. He was at a loss. Nia Yang died at the hands of Jiang Pengji. After his death, his soul did not return to the underworld. Instead, he was reborn in a completely unfamiliar dynasty. This body was that of a beggar. His parents died of famine, and he relied on stealing and the support of kind-hearted people to survive. Life was so difficult. The child beggar tried his best to survive, but he was still frozen to death by the sudden snowfall last night. When he woke up again, his inner core had become Nia Yang. Of course, he was happy to be reborn, but in this situation, he might as well die. Nia Yang sneered, "You've done so much evil in your life, but you still have a chance to start over." Ha, this God, he really didn't know if God was treating him well or torturing him on purpose. This body was that of an orphan with no parents, no name, and no family. He was penniless and had no home. He was frozen to death in this broken temple. The people nearby called him dog, and the children called him fool. With such a terrible life, if he didn't have the opportunity, he would probably never be able to turn over a new leaf. Nia Yang was, after all, an ancient person. His thinking was more inclined to believe that this beggar was actually his reincarnation. But for some reason, the soup of Mengpa didn't work, and it made him remember his previous life. According to this line of thinking, his current life situation could be explained. He had done so much evil in his previous life, so there was no glory or wealth in his next life. He could only live a poor life. Nia Yang's lips curled into a somewhat mocking sneer. In his previous life, he had been born into a gentry family and was the son of a respectable noble family. Now, he was a beggar. Even if he worked hard, at most he would be ranked among the poor, and people would look down on him. Thinking about it this way, he felt indignant. However, it was too early to think about this. He had to solve the problem of food and warmth first. Nia Yang thought about it and followed his memory to the only private school near the village. The examination system in this world was not quite the same as the evaluation system he knew. It was the imperial examination to select scholars. The form of the imperial examination was somewhat similar to the teaching and promotion system implemented by the Duke of Lanting in Wanzhou. However, fortunately, it was the imperial examination and not the evaluation system. Otherwise, Nia Yang would never be able to climb up in this lifetime. The evaluation of scholars was based on family background and appearance. Talent was actually secondary. Nia Yang's identity in this life was only a beggar. He couldn't even be considered poor. Just based on his family background, he would forever be rejected from officialdom. He still had a chance in the imperial examination to select scholars. Nia Yang endured the cold and hunger and secretly peeked outside the window of the private school. He caught a glimpse of the content of the teacher's lecture and felt a bit more satisfied. Although the history of this dynasty was very different from what he knew, the characters in both were the same. Nia Yang didn't have to be illiterate anymore. The private school teacher also noticed the beggar outside the window but didn't pay much attention. This beggar often came over to pick up the students' leftovers. He looked very pitiful, so the teacher would occasionally soften his heart and give him alms. The teacher randomly tested a few students on yesterday's homework. Every student stuttered, which made him very disappointed. At this time, he heard a murmur outside the window. He listened carefully and didn't miss a single word. He looked again and saw that it was the beggar. "Do you know how to recite?" the teacher asked. Niayang was secretly happy, but he said, "I remember everything just now." The teacher was slightly surprised and asked with interest, "Then what else can you recite?" Niayang opened his mouth and recited the few analects of Confucius that the teacher said today. It was strange that Confucius and Mencius were still alive in a strange dynasty. How stubborn. The teacher murmured, "How smart. What a pity. If he had money to go to school and receive education, he might even be able to pass the imperial examination. Unfortunately, he was a beggar who didn't know his next meal. No matter how talented he was, it would only be a waste." Niayang showed his doubts and asked the teacher about his confusion about one of the analects of Confucius. The teacher smiled indifferently. "What confusion can you have?" It was good enough that he could recite it word for word. How could he have his own opinion? If it was the previous beggar, he probably couldn't. But Niayang was different. In terms of talent and learning, 10 teachers together might not be a match for Niayang. Why? Niayang was born in a noble family in his previous life. The educational resources in front of Niayang were the best at that time. He received an elite education and never lacked writing brushes, ink, and paper. The teachers were all famous scholars and he could read the rare books of the poor. Not to mention that Niayang was talented, even if he was stupid, with so many educational resources, he would be much better than the ordinary poor. The teacher in front of him had studied hard for more than 10 years and failed several provincial examinations. He was discouraged and came back to teach. Niayang's acting skills were beyond doubt. Even if he was at a disadvantage, he could still create the most suitable opportunity. The teacher was shocked after hearing this. Niayang said again, "I can do all kinds of dirty and tiring work. Teacher, please do me a favor and give me something to eat." The teacher frowned. This is not a charity hall. Although he didn't look down on Niayang, the strong sarcasm in his words could be heard by anyone who wasn't deaf. Niayang had always been a smiling tiger in his previous life. All his emotions were hidden deep in his heart and no one could see them. He knew how to prioritize things. Right now, survival was the most important thing, and he could still endure this little bit of setback. "Although I'm not talented, I know shame." Niayang lowered his posture and said word by word, "If you have any work like copying and engraving, I can do it. It's so cold now. If I don't find a way out, I'm afraid I won't be able to survive until spring." Niayang had a good eye for people and the teacher in front of him had a good reputation in the surrounding villages. He could play the emotional card. Sure enough, the teacher heard Niayang's words and asked him, "You can copy and engrave?" Niayang nodded and showed his 2 frostbitten hands. He said awkwardly, "I can write. I used to secretly watch the teacher teach and practiced with a branch for a long time. But my hands are a little hard from the cold. If I write with a pen, I'm afraid it won't look good." The teacher looked down at Niayang's hands. They were almost black from the cold. The cracks and frostbites made people feel sorry for him. Thinking of this, he felt pity for him. If this child could really copy well, it would be fine to give him some food to eat. Words were no proof. Even if the teacher was a kind person, he would not believe Niayang's words. He still had to test his handwriting. The teacher did not think that a child who had not gone through systematic learning could write well. Niayang felt relieved when he saw the teacher's attitude soften. He endured the pain and washed the stains off his hands and arms with ice and snow. Then he rolled up his sleeves and started writing so that the table, paper and pen would not be dirted. Niayang's attitude was sincere and kind. The teacher liked him a lot. Nia Yang's handwriting was good. After all, he was a student of a famous calligrapher. It was just that he had changed his body and his wrist strength was not good enough. He could not write as well as he did in his previous life. Even so, the teacher was still shocked. Nia Yang was from an aristocratic family. He was best at writing two types of characters. One was the popular Wan Ti in Zhongzhou, and the other was the Mot. These two types of characters were created by Zhongzhou's modern calligrapher. The person who created the Wan Ti was a woman from an aristocratic family. At that time, the for self-accomplishment classics for women had not been created. Women from aristocratic families had a high status. This lady's handwriting was charming and graceful. Many noble ladies followed her example. Many young aristocratic families who pursued fashion also liked to copy and learn. Nia Yang was also a fan. His Wan Ti was more charming than many women's. The calligrapher who created the Mot was Nia Yang's teacher. At the same time, it was also the character that Nia Yang wrote the most. This type of character was famous for being thick, square, and clear. Nia Yang studied the Mot to hide his true nature. After all, people said, calligraphy is like the person. One could see a person's nature through his calligraphy. Reality proved that this was nonsense. Nia Yang had learned 70% of his teacher's Mot. Outsiders thought that he was a gentleman. Who knew that he was a scheming villain? At this time, the calligraphy was naturally Nia Yang's best Mot. Did you really practice it yourself? The headmaster looked at Nia Yang with a complicated expression. He did not know that this beggar had such a talent. He had almost been buried. Nia Yang nodded and twisted his fingers pitifully. He said pitifully, I beg the headmaster of the academy to do me a favor and let me have a meal. The headmaster sighed. Forget it. I'll leave the copying and engraving to you. 2 meals a day. Is that okay? Nia Yang smiled. Thank you, headmaster. If I have a chance in the future, I will not forget your kindness. A chance in the future? The headmaster smiled and waved his hand. It's not that simple. Take care of yourself first. Why did Nia Yang set the private school as his goal? Because he needed a way out. He was not willing to be an ordinary person. If he did not work hard to find a way out, would he freeze to death or starve to death in the ruined temple? The private school had some books. Nia Yang helped here. He could read the books and understand the details of this era. He could also solve the problem of food and clothing. He looked at the rice paper on the table and sighed in his heart. Although there was paper in his previous life, it was very precious and produced in small quantities. Many small gentry families could only use thick bamboo slips to carve words. At this moment, even a scholar from a poor family who taught in a private school could use such uniform and fine paper. It could be seen that the overall standard of this era was much better than in his previous life. His hands and feet were itchy and painful from frostbite, but Nia Yang did not seem to feel it. He began to copy as usual. At first, he was not used to it. After a whole afternoon, he was much faster. After a while, the headmaster brought him a set of clothes that had been washed white. There were 2 wooden boxes on the clothes. You can wear this set of clothes. There is also some ointment for frostbite. The headmaster asked him, do you have a place to stay? I'm living in a ruined temple 3 miles away. That ruined temple is drafty. What's the difference between living there and living in the open? The headmaster frowned. A ruined temple could not keep out the wind and rain. Living there would be courting death. If you don't mind, you can stay in the woodshed. We'll decide when the weather gets warmer. Nia Yang's eyes showed gratitude. He said sincerely, thank you, headmaster. From that day on, Nia Yang lived in the woodshed of the private school peacefully. During the day, he diligently copied the books that the headmaster borrowed from everywhere. At the same time, he secretly recorded the contents of the books. The headmaster provided 2 meals a day, but the portions were always sufficient. Unknowingly, it was March. One day, school ended. The headmaster went to the town to run some errands. Yang did not have any tasks, so he lay in the corridor and took a light nap. When he opened his eyes, the sky was already red. The headmaster sat beside him and looked at him. "You've been here for more than a month, but I still don't know your name." Yang said, "My surname is Nya, and my first name is Yang." His parents died early in this life and they did not have time to choose a name. Yang did not know their surnames, so he simply used the surnames of his previous life. Yang. There are many Westerners. The river is vast, and it flows northward. The headmaster smiled. It's a wonderful scene. After a pause, the headmaster asked him, "Do you have any other family members?" Yang was startled and shook his head. No, he was already alone and deserted by everyone. How could he have any other family members? When I heard you murmuring Enchanting in your dream, I thought it was your living relative. The headmaster said regretfully, "You're very talented. If your family is willing to support you in your studies, you can still have a future in the officialdom. Even if you don't bring glory to your ancestors, at least you won't have to worry about food and clothing." When the headmaster said the 2 words, Enchanting, Yang's face turned completely white, without any color. Ever since he woke up, he had been busy making a living. In the dead of night, he restrained himself from thinking about his previous life. Who would have thought that he was actually talking in his sleep? What's wrong? Do you feel uncomfortable? Thank you for your concern, headmaster. I'm fine. It's just that I suddenly thought of my cousin and felt very sad. Chapter 1659. Spring left and autumn came, and winter and summer changed seasons. On the outside, Yang looked like a young child, but on the inside, he was an adult with deep schemes. He helped the headmaster manage the private school while absorbing the knowledge of this era like a whale sucking in a dragon. The headmaster saw it but did not stop him. He even gave Yang some advice occasionally. In his eyes, Yang was destined to be an extraordinary person. If he had a good future, he would also benefit. When Yang was 10 years old, the headmaster suggested him to try his luck by participating in the county-level exam. The county-level exam was divided into 3 stages, the county exam, and the academy exam. If he passed, he would receive food from the government every month. Even if he could not go further, he would still be much better than an ordinary person. Yang said humbly, "I don't have a good foundation. I'm afraid I won't pass." The headmaster said, "The county-level exam is not as difficult as you think. With your current foundation, you should be able to pass." Participating in the county-level exam required complicated procedures. The headmaster told him to focus on his revision and ran around to complete all the procedures. Yang watched from the side with an indescribable sense of melancholy. Whether it was Enchanting or this teacher, they did not know what kind of bullshit the real Yang was. The headmaster lent Yang some money and gave him a lift to participate in the county-level exam. As the headmaster expected, the county-level exam was not difficult. It was not a challenge for Yang at all. He passed the first exam and became a gifted student. At the same time, he became the youngest in that year and was known as a genius. Yang's life improved a lot since he was a gifted student. He stayed in the private school to make a living and spent more time studying every day. After preparing for the exam for several years, Yang took the autumn county exam at the age of 16 and passed the top scorer. Then he took the spring exam and passed the top scorer. He performed very well in the palace exam and the emperor wanted to help him pass 3 top scorers in a row. Thus, Yang was promoted to the top scorer. He passed 3 top scorers in a row before he was 20. Suddenly, Yang's social status rose and many people tried to rope him in. Outsiders all thought that Nia Yang would become arrogant because of this. Who would have thought that this little Zhuang Yuan would be able to keep his composure and conduct himself with the demeanor of a great family? If he was thrown into the crowd of nobles in the capital, just by looking at his temperament, it would be hard to tell that Nia Yang was once a beggar. He would look more like a naturally born rich noble. Nia Yang didn't get carried away because he knew very well that being the top scholar was only an entrance ticket to the officialdom, not a ticket to the finish line. How high he could climb in the future and how much power he could control all depended on his future management. At the Jasper Forest banquet, many people wanted to see what this Zhuang Yuan, who had yet to reach the age of 20, looked like. Nia Yang wore a clear and harmless smile on his face as he walked among the nobles with ease. His every movement didn't seem like that of a bookworm who had studied hard, but more like that of an experienced official. Before the court examinations, Nia Yang had tried his best to gather information about the situation in the court. The current emperor's surname was Nia. He was 32 years old when he ascended the throne in the first year of Taikang. He had 5 sons and 3 daughters. The first 4 princes had already reached adulthood. Only the 5th prince, who was also the crown prince born by Empress Yuan, had yet to reach adulthood. Counting them, he was half a year older than Nia Yang. A few years ago, Empress Yuan had died of illness. The emperor had the intention of suppressing Empress Yuan's paternal family, the Duke of Zhenghua. In addition, the 4 older princes had entered the court one after another after coming of age. There was a faint tendency to surround and attack the crown prince. The crown prince was only the heir to the throne of the empire. His privileges were only one level lower than the emperor's. However, he was still not the emperor and his life was in danger. Nia Yang had a faint smile on his face. In his heart, he was calculating which prince had the upper hand. However, his calculations still fell through when he heard the name of the crown prince. Nia Qing, it was actually Nia Qing. Nia Yang was very surprised. His hand trembled and wine spilled out. After the Jasper Forest banquet began, the emperor, the crown prince, and the other 4 princes appeared one after another. Nia Yang's expression changed over and over again. There was no other reason. The crown prince's face, figure, manner of speech, and temperament were almost identical to his cousin Nia Qing from his previous life. The difference was that his cousin Nia Qing was a bright and elegant scholar. Like the bright moon, he always had a faint smile on his lips. His every move was a role model for nobles. The crown prince in front of him was indeed similar, but there was a faint hint of melancholy between his brows. Nia Yang suppressed his wildly beating heart and kept his breathing steady. However, he could not bear to look away from the crown prince. Why were they so similar? Could it be that the crown prince was the reincarnation of his cousin Nia Qing? That was also possible. Nia Qing was born rich and did not do evil. It was reasonable for him to be reincarnated into the imperial family and become the crown prince. Nia Yang swallowed nervously. His hands hidden in his sleeves were sweating profusely. His fingers were almost twisted into a ball. "Cousin," Nia Yang murmured, his eyes welling up with tears. The others only thought that he was young and could not hold his liquor. After a few teasing words, they turned their attention to the ranking Ai and Tanhua. In the middle of the Jasper Forest banquet, Nia Yang caught a glimpse of the crown prince getting up to leave. He found an excuse to follow, but was blocked by someone. "Why is the top scholar here?" The crown prince revealed a suspicious look, but the vigilance in his eyes made Nia Yang instantly sober. He was not Nia Qing. No, it should be said that he was not the Nia Qing he knew. Nia Yang's heart raced, but he showed an embarrassed expression. He lowered his head and said in a low voice, "I can't hold my liquor. I drank a little too much just now, but I couldn't find a place to change, so I couldn't ask, so, Your Highness, please forgive me for my lack of manners." The crown prince's expression eased. This was also Nia Yang's fault for looking so harmless that people could not raise their guard. Perhaps it was an ill-fated fate, but Nia Yang looked exactly the same in this life as in his previous life. He naturally knew how to show his harmless side. The crown prince's expression eased after hearing this, and he called for a palace maid to lead the way for Niayang. As Niayang watched him leave, an indescribable feeling welled up in his heart. He owed so much in his previous life, could he pay it all back in this life? After the Jasper Forest banquet, Niayang was appointed to the Hanlon Academy as a secondary class 6th rank. He was in charge of the nation's history, compiling records, and recording the emperor's words and deeds. Simply put, he was a secretary. This position was considered a high starting point for Niayang, who had a poor background. If he did not work hard, he would probably squat in this position for the rest of his life. If he did well and won the emperor's favor, then the role and power of this position would not be small. In fact, there were records of top scholars in the past who were secondary class 6th rank for their entire lives. The imperial examinations were just a ticket. After entering this officialdom, how high one could climb in the end depended on one's own ability. Niayang smiled and narrowed his eyes, not worried about his future at all. Even though Niaqing said his temperament was not good, he had to admit that only people with this kind of temperament could do well in the officialdom. In comparison, he was more concerned about the crown prince. Niaqing, Niayang murmured, a trace of determination flashing in his eyes. Regardless of whether this crown prince was the reincarnation of his cousin, he had to help him ascend to the throne. This way, perhaps they would not owe each other anything. Niayang's temperament was born for officialdom. In other words, he was born for this bowl of rice. In just half a year, he had seen through the emperor's thoughts and became a trusted official of the emperor. His future was limitless. The nobles in the court tried to rope in this new noble, and the 4 adult princes also tried to extend an olive branch to him. Niayang did not refuse, nor did he give a definite answer. He obediently did his job. Because he had become a Hanlon Academy scholar, Niayang and the crown prince had more opportunities to meet. Because they were close in age, they had more topics to talk about than others, and they could occasionally talk. After some contact, Niayang had a deeper understanding of the crown prince's position. In short, it was not optimistic. Empress Yuan was dead, his mother's family was continuously suppressed, the 4 older royal brothers were pressuring him step by step, and the emperor's attitude towards the crown prince was becoming more and more ambiguous. In such a situation where he was besieged on all sides, not to mention this crown prince, anyone else would be forced to become irritable. Niayang waited for the crown prince to recruit him, but after waiting for half a year, the crown prince did not even let out a fart. He really could not wait any longer, so Niayang took the initiative to attack, hinting that there was a problem with Niaqing's camp. The crown prince was dazed for a moment, then smiled warmly. I heard that Zhong Yi had refused 4 royal brothers in succession. This solitude was curious and guessed that Zhong Yi had other plans, such as wholeheartedly loyal to imperial father. I did not expect that Zhong Yi would like this solitude. This solitude's current situation will disappoint you. The crown prince was the heir to the throne and was outstanding in all aspects. In Niayang's view, he was no different from his own cousin. If not for the surrounding scene reminding him, he would have thought that the 2 of them had returned to their previous life. Niayang's heart moved slightly. He had not thought that the crown prince would be so clear about his situation. Since it was so, why didn't he think of a way to save himself? In Niayang's view, the crown prince's recent attitude was somewhat passive. Your Highness's words are incorrect. You are the crown prince, the legitimate son of Empress Yuan, the heir to the throne, the rightful successor. Niayang said word by word, as long as your Highness is patient and wholeheartedly serves the emperor, father, the court, and the people, how can the 4 princes surpass you? This was not passive resistance, this was called not changing, not fighting was fighting. Niaqing's heart surged with waves of warmth, his eyes filled with rare sincerity. Grand Tutor, grandfather and the others also said similar things, but at that time, this solitude felt distraught and did not listen. When Zhong Yi said these words, this solitude had a different experience. When the crown prince met his gaze, he felt an indescribable sense of familiarity. He had not been in frequent contact with this Hanlon Academy cultivator, but he unconsciously trusted the other, as if they were old friends from a previous life. If your highness pays attention to the fight for the throne, you will be at a disadvantage. Niayang said, you are the heir to the throne, this is what you were born with, why do you need to fight endlessly with the princes? There is no harm in looking at the world, the people's livelihood, this is the breadth of mind of an emperor. This subject thinks. His Majesty may be using this to train you. The foreign forces are powerful, they can help your highness now, but in the future they will be a hindrance. The crown prince's brows furrowed, showing some anger. Niayang, do you know what you are saying? Sowing discord between him and his mother's family? Niayang said, I know very well. The crown prince said, then you still dare to say it? Niayang said, there are some things that I know should not be said, but I still have to say them. This subject serves the emperor wholeheartedly, you are the legitimate heir, naturally I have to plan for you. The crown prince choked, but he could not deny that Niayang's words swept away the anxiety of recent years, calming his heart. I don't know why. The crown prince looked deeply at Niaqing, this solitude has a feeling that you seem to be looking at someone. Niayang's smile became more difficult, and he said awkwardly, this subject will say something offensive, this subject has a cousin, he is also called Qing. Last year at the Jasper Forest banquet, this subject heard your highness's name and couldn't help it. Thus, this subject feels especially close to your highness, please forgive me, your highness. The crown prince did not expect this reason, and raised a hand to help Niayang, who was bowing in apology, up. It's not a big deal, the crown prince said, where is your cousin now? Niayang said, this subject made a mistake, and my cousin unfortunately died young. Before he died, he said to this subject, our friendship is severed, and we will not meet again on the road to the Yellow Springs. The crown prince was not angry at being offended, but rather curious what Niayang had done to make his cousin say such harsh words. No, it is not my cousin's fault. Although this subject has a clear conscience, to my cousin, this is indeed an unforgivable crime. Zhong Yi is like a woman, crying just like that? Probably because the matter had been explained, the crown prince's attitude towards Niayang became much gentler. Niayang was shocked to find that he had unknowingly shed tears, and he immediately felt somewhat embarrassed. Actually, I will not hide it from Zhong Yi, when this solitude first saw Zhong Yi, there was a faint sense of familiarity. When Niayang heard this, his eyes widened in shock. Regardless of whether this crown prince was speaking the truth or not, Niayang decided to bet all his chips on him. As the emperor grew older, the fight for the throne became more and more serious, and Niayang took advantage of this demonic wind to soar. His official career was smooth, and the speed of his promotion was as fast as a rocket. At a young age, he sat in the position of Yuanfu, the head of the civil officials. Although his relationship with the crown prince was good, it was limited to a personal relationship. When it came to politics, they still fought. The civil and military officials were confused by this. The crown prince's presence was still very low, and his position seemed to be on the verge of collapse, but the old emperor did not show any intention of removing him. He was not anxious, but the four older princes were. Niayang smiled coldly as he watched on. He had secretly schemed, causing the first prince, who had military power, to repeatedly make stupid moves, framing, well, it could not be said to be framing. The first prince did have the intention of forcing the emperor to abdicate, but Niayang had just materialized his thoughts and put them into practice. When the second prince supervised the imperial examinations, Niayang had exposed a huge case of cheating in the examination that year, and successfully removed him from the imperial examinations. The third prince was the son of the imperial concubine, so he had some influence in the imperial harem and the court. Niayang had started with the imperial concubine's mother's family. In this world, there were only stains that had not been found, and there were no clean, and dignified nobles. The fourth prince was even simpler. Niayang himself was an Oscar winner, so how could he not see that the fourth prince, who seemed uncompetitive, was actually very scheming. Nianyang would not be merciful to his own kind. In just a few years, he had defeated all the princes. He had eliminated his political enemies at the front, and the crown prince, Enchanting, had taken care of things for him from behind, so that the old emperor would not find out. After 2 years, the old emperor abdicated as the crown prince. The court was shaken, and Nianyang was stunned. On the eve of his ascension to the throne, the old emperor had looked at him meaningfully, but the crown prince had asked Nianyang if he had any plans for the future. Nianyang thought for a long time. First, I will be a powerful official. Second, I will block my cousin on the road to the Yellow Springs. He said that we would not meet again on the road to the Yellow Springs, but I insist on seeing him. Nianyang looked into the crown prince's eyes and said lightly, whether he admits it or not, I have repaid what I owe him. The crown prince laughed involuntarily. What if he doesn't admit it? Chapter 1660. Lu Zheng might have known what Enchanting was thinking. However, what could he do even if he knew? Lu Zheng was a hot-tempered and arrogant man. He would not lower his bottom line just to please Enchanting, even if Enchanting was his lord. It wasn't that he didn't know why his relationship with Enchanting had become so stiff, and it wasn't that he didn't have a way to fix it. The reason why he hadn't taken any action was because he knew very well that the crux of the problem between him and Enchanting was that they had different ideals. There was no solution to this problem. Unless Enchanting was fundamentally changed or Lv Zheng abandoned himself, he and Enchanting were destined to walk in opposite directions. For many people, in order to climb up, they could give up anything. Lu Zheng also wanted to stand out, but if the price was his bottom line, he would not agree. Thus, the current situation was more or less because Lu Zheng had no choice but to go with the flow. No matter how much Lu Zheng cursed his lord in his mind, he still had to do what he had to do. Ever since Enchanting had brought troops to support the front line, the expansion speed of Jiang Pengji's troops had been greatly curbed. After half a month of small-scale confrontations, the troops of both sides were in a stalemate. They were like fire and water, and it looked like an ultimate war was about to break out. Foster father, how could Lord Enchanting treat you like this? Kang Shintong was like a trapped beast, pacing back and forth in the tent. She stomped her feet twice as if she was venting her anger, her eyes wide open. Have you finished reciting today's copy of the Analects of Confucius? What are you angry about? Lu Zheng had lost a lot of weight these days. There were piles of bamboo slips and official documents on his desk. He rarely had the time to look up at his indignant adopted daughter. He put down his brush, rubbed his wrist, and sighed. Sit down. Don't walk back and forth in the tent. You're making foster father dizzy. Don't be angry, your little mouth is so angry that you can hang a wine cup on it. How could Kang Shintong endure this? She had been staying in Lu Zheng's tent for the past few days. Even if she were to leave, she would bring guards with her to protect herself. Come here and help me tidy up these bamboo slips. Sort them out and tidy them up. Lu Zheng waved at Kang Shintong, trying to persuade his adopted daughter not to get angry so easily. There was really no need to be calculative with Enchanting. Kang Shintong was about to cry from anger. She hadn't come to the front line, so she didn't know that her foster father was in such a bad situation. Enchanting, that pig trotter, was a complete scumbag. Did he really think that his godfather was a brick, moving wherever he was needed? The enemy's momentum was fierce, but it was only thanks to Ifu's ingenious plan and the arrangement of the troops that they managed to stabilize the situation, breaking the enemy's momentum and stopping their advance. As soon as the battle formation was stabilized, Enchanting could not wait to throw Lu Zheng, who was supervising the battle, to the rear to deal with trivial matters. There were so many matters that Lu Zheng had to stay up all night to fight. Kang Shintong could not see anything else. She could only see that Enchanting had shamelessly taken credit and glory from his subjects. What a shameless pig trotter. Kang Shintong watched as her foster father lost weight. Even if he was busy, he still grabbed hold of her studies and answered her questions. How could she not be touched? His adoptive father was such a good man, so why was Enchui so guarded against him? Did Enchui really think that his foster father couldn't be anyone else but him? Godfather, your daughter is coming. Kang Shintong was about to say something, but she forcefully held back her words and obediently helped Lu Jing share his burden. After busying herself for a while and clearing away some of the bamboo slips that had piled up like a mountain on the table, Lu Jing heaved a sigh of relief. He had the time to discipline his foster daughter. This is a military camp, and there are openings in all directions. Remember to be careful with your words and actions, lest the Lord hears what you shouldn't say. Lu Jing lectured his foster daughter with a stern expression. Kang Shintong hung her head dejectedly and obediently complied. Lu Jing said, actually, it's fine if I'm not at the front of the battle formation. There are many talents in the Lord's camp. Naturally, he can stabilize the situation. Kang Shintong said, you're kind. You're still covering up for them at this time. She had seen how good Lu Jing was. In her heart, apart from her idol, Jiang Pengji, Lu Jing was the best. The outcome of the battle isn't something that can be decided by one person. At most, I've prevented them from being schemed against by the enemy, but you can't say that this is all my credit. Speaking up to this point, Lu Jing paused and added, moreover, Lu Shi has yet to appear at the front of the battle formation. Kang Shintong's gaze was filled with doubt. This fellow Lu Shi. There are few who are better at fighting than him, and there are few who are smarter than him. Based on his past experiences, wherever there's a war to fight, he'll be there. Lu Jing muttered, looking at the enemies everywhere, Zhongzhao has basically been defeated. Other than the Lord's Nanxing, he has no other battlefield to join in the fun. The two armies have been at war for more than a month, but there's no trace of him in the various battlefields. It's really strange. In the past, Jiang Pengji was too active. Now that she was suddenly as quiet as a chicken, Lu Jing felt uneasy. Foster father, you mean? Kang Shintong thought that her foster father would say something groundbreaking, but unexpectedly, either he's injured or he's pregnant. However, it's not the first time that Lu Shi has pretended to be sick to deceive people. He's so good at fighting, so it's ridiculous that he's injured or sick. On the contrary, the probability of him being pregnant is higher. Otherwise, I really can't think of why he hasn't appeared at the front of the battle formation. Kang Shintong was speechless. A normal lord wouldn't run to the front to fight with the enemy, right? Besides, why is the probability of him being pregnant higher than being injured? Can't he not appear at the front because he wants to be a good lord? Perhaps, there's another plot. For example, to divert attention and sneak attack our army after deceiving everyone? Lu Jing couldn't help but roll his eyes. The terrain here is open and flat. If there's a sneak attack, his tracks will be exposed before he even gets close. He'll become a hedgehog. No matter what, Lu Jing was from Langyi Academy. He was one of Master Yuanjing's disciples. His foundation was solid, and his knowledge of setting up a camp was perfect. When he chose to set up camp here, he naturally considered the possibility of the enemy launching a sneak attack. Kang Shintong responded with an "oh," and faintly heard Lu Jing muttering in a low voice. Something's wrong. How can he be peaceful? Kang Shintong said, foster father, I have something to say, but I don't know if I should say it. If you don't want to say it, then don't. Lu Jing imitated Jiang Pengji's words. Seeing Kang Shintong's face turn red and her anxious and flustered appearance, he couldn't help but curse Jiang Pengji for leading him astray. He changed his words and said, I'm just teasing you. Just say what you want to say. Don't hide it. Kang Shintong took a deep breath. Foster father. Since you're close to the Duke of Lanting, and Lord Enchui treats you so poorly, why do you have to do this? Why don't you make use of our friendship as classmates and make contributions? No matter what, the Duke of Lanting will think highly of you. Lu Zheng's face turned cold, but he didn't get angry, and he didn't reprimand her. He just said with a cold face, compared to Fang Ji, you seem more like a lobbyist sent by Lu Shi. Whose foster daughter are you? Chapter 1661. Kang Shintong lowered her head timidly. There's no room for discussion. You're still young and don't understand. It's late, go and rest. Lu Zheng ordered for her to be driven away. Kang Shintong knew she had said something wrong and looked nervous and afraid. She bit her lower lip so hard that a mark appeared. Here, godfather, sleep early too. Don't tire yourself out. Kang Shintong retreated. Lu Zheng stared at the candlelight in a daze. This child is still too young, Lu Zheng sighed softly as if he was lamenting. If Kang Shintong had been calmer, she would have realized that Lu Zheng didn't despise her for saying such treacherous words. He didn't even reprimand her. It could be seen that Lu Zheng wasn't completely loyal to Enshui. He even had many complaints. Just as Lu Zheng had said, Kang Shintong was too young. Her thoughts were all natural and didn't know the twists and turns. Lu Zheng's personality determined that he wasn't someone who would surrender without a fight. Flattery was better than death. It was the same even if Enshui was a pig. After this conversation, Lu Zheng was no different than usual. Kang Shintong, on the other hand, felt guilty and regretful. She had been too impulsive. Even though it was for her godfather's good, he had assisted Enshui for so long. He couldn't just give up. Kang Shintong was regretting when a loud horn sounded outside the tent. The drums were beating like thunder, causing the sand on the ground to tremble. Her heart tightened. She secretly opened the tent's curtain and looked outside. Although she couldn't see anything from here, she could feel a murderous aura choking her throat and preventing her from breathing as she looked at the much emptier military camp and the sound of the war drums coming from afar. Kang Shintong looked at the hurried figures and murmured softly. There's another battle. Is Godfather all right? The battle had lasted from dawn to dusk. During this time, many wounded soldiers had been carried back from outside. Some of the wounded soldiers were bathed in blood and looked like blood people. Their original appearance could not be seen. Some of them had broken limbs and wreckage, and their human forms could not be seen. All of them were in so much pain that they wanted to die. Moans of pain flowed from the corners of their lips. Almost none of them had their arms or legs intact. Their bodies were covered in wounds. If she wasn't still alive, Kang Shintong would have suspected that she had come to the underworld. Kang Shintong obeyed Lu Zheng's warning and did not dare to run around. Every time the battle started, she would hide in her tent. While his heart was beating like a drum, he listened to the movements outside. Even though Jiang Pengji was her idol, she knew that once Enshui was defeated, the military camp would be in danger. Not only would she be in danger, but her godfather would also meet with misfortune. Therefore, every time there was a war, she would worry for a long time, from the moment the war drums sounded until the gongs sounded to retreat. He was worried that Jiang Pengji would lose and that his foster father would be in danger. She asked someone to leave some food for Zheng. She cooked a small stove to keep him warm so that he could eat hot food as soon as he came back. Perhaps it was because the enemy's offensive had become much fiercer and the war was in a tight situation. Lu Zheng did not deal with his chores for the past 2 days. He was summoned by Enshui for a meeting before dawn and did not return even when the moon was high in the sky. Not knowing how the battle situation was, Kang Shintong yawned next to the small stove. When she woke up, she did not see Lu Zheng return. Could it be that we've lost today? Kang Shintong recalled the number of wounded soldiers she saw during the day. The number was indeed greater than the previous few times, and it looked even more tragic. She hugged her knees and waited for a while. Finally, she heard familiar footsteps coming from outside the tent. Kang Shintong was energized and her sleepiness disappeared completely. Godfather. She called out. The tent flap was lifted. With the help of a few candles in the tent, she could barely see who it was. Why aren't you sleeping? Lu Zheng was slightly stunned. Kang Shintong had already stepped forward to welcome him. He subconsciously took a step back, but it was still too late. Kang Shintong smelled the scent of blood on his body and her expression changed drastically. Kang Shintong asked hurriedly, "Is Godfather injured?" Lu Zheng raised his hand to cover his left arm and shook his head. Swords have no eyes in front of a battle. It's inevitable that he will be injured. Kang Shintong said, "Godfather is the military supervisor. He's in the middle of the army. How can he be injured so easily? Unless the formation of the three armies was broken by the enemy and the enemy rushed into their own formation, it was possible that Lu Zheng, who was heavily protected, would be accidentally injured." Lu Zheng's brows showed some fatigue. He said, "Today's battle situation is not optimistic. The enemy's combat power is extremely strong, while our army," he wanted to say something but stopped. In terms of the number of troops in the three armies, Enchanting undoubtedly had a great advantage. They were almost twice as many as the enemy. But, in terms of overall combat quality, the elites under Jiang Pengji's command obeyed orders strictly. Their ability to carry out battles was extremely strong, and the combat power they displayed was naturally tyrannical. Even without Jiang Pengji, who was a bug in the game, charging and killing at the front, they gradually suppressed Enchanting's arrogance. Lu Zheng had seen countless storms and waves, but he had never wanted to curse like he did today. Look at the enemy's combat quality, look at his own people's ability to carry out their tasks. The troops under Jiang Pengji's command used their actions to tell Enchanting that numbers didn't mean everything. Their quality was inferior to the enemy's, and Enchanting had recruited so many ordinary young men in such a short period of time who were waving flags and shouting battle cries. They had forcefully lowered the overall quality of the troops. Over the past few days, Lu Zheng had tasted what it meant to be powerless. He almost couldn't suppress his negative emotions. In his mind, he had several formations to deal with the enemy. He cooperated with the chief commander to issue military orders, but the effect was far from what he had expected. It was as if his brain was active and he tried to control his body to counterattack and defend against the enemy, but his limbs wouldn't listen to him. He was either paralyzed and stiff, or he was flailing about. He could only watch helplessly as the enemy's raised blade pierced into his body. Lu Zheng had returned so late that day, not only because he was injured, but more importantly, because Enchanting had made him stay behind and reprimanded him. Everyone knew what the crux of the matter was, but no one stood up for Lu Zheng. They didn't dare to say it. What did they say? That the overall combat power of the army wasn't strong because the quality of the troops that Enchanting had forcibly recruited was too weak. Not only did they not increase their combat power, but they were also holding them back. If they said that, it would be tantamount to questioning Enchanting's decision and ability. No one wanted to commit a crime when Enchanting was furious. Lu Zheng became the scapegoat. Of course, Enchanting still had a sense of propriety. Although he said it was a reprimand, he actually didn't say anything harsh. After all, his trusted aide and right-hand man, Hua Yuan, wasn't here. He still needed to rely on Lu Zheng now. He couldn't completely offend him and disappoint him. Kang Shintong was silent. She only brought the warm food to Lu Zheng, hoping that he would eat a little. "I'm afraid that in this battle. I'll try my best to help you settle down." Jiang Pengji still didn't participate in the battle, but the army led by Fu Wang was assisted by a few famous strategists. Lu Zheng was surrounded by useless teammates. He had the heart but not the strength. Before the situation worsened, he planned to first find a way out for Kang Shintong and ensure her safety. "I'm not going anywhere." Kang Shintong refused resolutely. Lu Zheng ate in silence, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. Without waiting for Lu Zheng to come up with a plan, bad news arrived 2 days later. It shocked the entire army and made them anxious and uneasy. 200,000 dawn of rations had been stolen. Enchanting was so angry that his entire body trembled. He killed the general who was responsible for escorting the rations. In his heart, he even cursed 18 generations of Jiang Pengji's ancestors. Lu Zheng frowned slightly. Jiang Pengji, who had been in seclusion for 2 months, had appeared. She seized 200,000 dawn of rations in one move. Lu Zheng sighed and said, "It's really her style, it was fine if she didn't move, but once she did, she would kill. In response, Jiang Pengji expressed her apology. Me. The things she had done were studied under a magnifying glass and analyzed over and over again. As her enemies, and Shui and the others naturally knew how many things this fiend had done that made people tremble in fear just by hearing her name. After the analysis, they unanimously threw the blame to her. Little did they know that after Jiang Pengji turned over a new leaf, she did not roam the front lines anymore, let alone bring people to rob rations. It was true that the people under her command had robbed the rations, but she was not the one who had benefited from the rations. Lu Zheng was keenly aware that something was wrong. He furrowed his brows and asked the people around him. After a while, he said to Shui, "My lord, there are still doubtful points in this matter. I sincerely ask my lord to retract your order and spare General Chai's life for now." Shui almost fainted from anger. He could not suppress his temper and reprimanded Lu Zheng for having ulterior motives in front of everyone. General Chai, whom Lu Zheng had accused of collaborating with the enemy and betraying his lord, should be killed if not this kind of person. Kill Lu Zheng? Shui did not expect Lu Zheng to plead for mercy on General Chai's behalf. He was even more furious. "I sincerely ask my lord to listen to me. There are many doubtful points in this matter. My lord should treat it with caution." Lu Zheng looked like he was going by the book. His tone was indifferent. "The matter of the rations is a secret of our army. How did the enemy know so much about it and catch General Chai off guard?" Shui laughed coldly and asked in return, "This person even has a letter of collaboration with the enemy and betrayal of his lord. How do you think Lu Shi knows so much about it?" The enemy could tell at a glance that this had been planned for a long time. There must have been an insider who leaked information to them. Who else could it be other than General Chai, who had irrefutable evidence? He really did not know what was wrong with such a stupid question. Lu Zheng said, "In that case, after the rations were stolen, why didn't he take the opportunity to be captured by Lu Shi and escape from his predicament? Instead, he led an army to break out of the encirclement and pass the news to my lord, causing him to be killed in the end. Also, General Chai said that the rations were fake. What's going on?" Shui said angrily, "It's just a traitor's way of survival and framing others." Lu Zheng did not think so. When the enemy had launched a sneak attack, General Chai had tried his best to protect the rations. However, the enemy had the advantage of time, place, and people. They had suddenly attacked and caught everyone off guard. With a ferocious move, the soldiers guarding the rations had been beaten senseless. General Chai had tried his best to delay the enemy but to no avail. In the end, he had no choice but to burn all the rations. They could not use them, and the rations could not fall into the enemy's hands. In the end, the rations on the top were normal, but the rations on the bottom were disguised. They did not contain rations at all. When General Chai discovered this, he was completely stunned. This was far more terrifying than an enemy's sneak attack. Shui wanted to kill him, so he revealed this matter. In the end, no one believed him. Framing others? Framing who? Lu Zheng said in a low voice. No matter how protective the Lord is, he should not be biased at a time like this. The person in charge of the rations was Hua Yuan. If the rations Hua Yuan had prepared were real, then General Chai was the liar. On the other hand, this problematic batch of rations had been prepared by Hua Yuan. Perhaps the one who leaked the details of the rations and attracted the enemy's precise attack was Hua Yuan. After some maneuvering, this batch of 200,000 dawn of rations was rightfully taken by Hua Yuan. Of course, Shui was not the only one who did not believe this. The others did not believe it either. What would Hua Yuan gain by doing this? They did not know, but Lu Zheng did. That madman's inner core was Lu Shi. What did he gain by seizing the rations and heartlessly betraying his teammates? This monster was preparing to ascend to the heavens. Of course, even if Lu Zheng told the others that Hua Yuan's essence had been divided into Lu Shi, no one would believe him. Instead, they would think that he was using clumsy and underhanded methods to suppress Hua Yuan. Lu Zheng could not be bothered with this thankless task. Do whatever you want. He had lost all hope in his teammates. And Shui was so angry that he was about to ascend to the heavens. What did Lu Zheng mean by this? Was he reprimanding him for being biased in front of everyone? They did not know that Jiang Pengji was also very angry. The anger levels of the two feudal lords had reached a delicate balance. Jiang Pengji looked at the rations that Li Yun had snatched back, and her face darkened. Humph, Lu Shaoyin has eaten a lot of pig's brains over the years. His brain is quite nourished. He even schemed against me. She gritted her teeth so hard that they made a ringing sound. The rations that she had spent so much effort to steal were actually fake. Her efforts had become a joke. After thinking about it, she locked her target on Lu Zheng. After all, this kind of underhanded plotting was indeed like him. No matter how big her brain was, she could not have guessed that Shui's official, Hua Yuan's essence, had created a Lu Shi and was secretly preparing to cause trouble. The real mastermind, Hua Yuan, stared coldly at the small porcelain bottle in his hand and smiled. What is this? The Xichang Emperor's concubine asked anxiously. Hua Yuan said, poison. The Xichang Emperor's concubine stuck out her belly and trembled. She asked fearfully, to whom? Hua Yuan laughed. Guess. The Emperor's concubine was speechless. Chapter 1663. This poison is for Shui. The Xichang Emperor's concubine knew that Hua Yuan was ambitious, but she didn't expect him to be so decisive. He actually wanted to poison Shui. No matter how bad Shui was, his trust in Hua Yuan and importance to him was unquestionable. He even valued Hua Yuan and neglected Lu Zheng. Now, Hua Yuan wanted Hua Yuan dead for some unknown reason. The Xichang Emperor's concubine shuddered at the thought of it. On second thought, Hua Yuan had forced her to do something even more disgusting. It didn't seem out of line for this person to have the ambition to kill her lord. Hua Yuan glanced at the Xichang Emperor's concubine, his thin lips curving into a smile. The golden light shone on his face, forming a faint halo. He looked like a god. Xichang's emperor concubine felt even more complicated when she saw this. Heaven had given Hua Yuan an outstanding appearance, an elegant demeanor, and even extraordinary intelligence. Yet, such a beautiful appearance hid such filth and filth. One could not help but sigh. As the Xichang Emperor's concubine's thoughts ran wild, she heard Hua Yuan's calm reply. Why would the side lady think that I want to poison my lord to death? My lord has treated me well. A drop of water should be repaid with a spring. The Xichang Emperor's concubine choked. Her face contorted. A drop of water should be repaid with a spring? The spring he mentioned was secretly transplanting a large patch of green grassland on his lord's head? Not only did he transplant the grassland, but he also manipulated it in secret. He relied on Shui's trust to tamper with the rations. She wasn't wrong. The rations that Li Yun had gone through so much trouble to rob had been intentionally given away by Hua Yuan. Only 10% of the rations were real. The other 90% were fake. Hua Yuan had secretly leaked information to lure the enemy over to rob the rations. Jiang Pengji had taken the bait and sent people to rob the rations. The 200,000 dawn of provisions were easily taken away by the enemy. Through this method, Hua Yuan managed to keep this batch of rations for himself in a justifiable manner. The Xichang Emperor's concubine and the prince felt uneasy. Hua Yuan's methods were so vicious and swift. Could they really gain even the slightest bit of advantage from him? The Empress concubine did her best to suppress the fear, worry, and fear in her heart, and forced out an extremely stiff smile. Hua Yuan had secretly embezzled a huge amount of rations and didn't even care about the lives and deaths of the frontline soldiers. Even a 3-year-old child wouldn't believe that he didn't have the intention to rebel. How could I not believe Sir's words? I misunderstood you just now. Although Emperor concubine Shichang said that, no one knew what she was thinking. I'm stupid. I hope you can give me some pointers so that I can understand. You don't know, but the Lord has been looking forward to the child in your womb for a long time. Hua Yuan stretched out his hand and used the back of his finger to caress Shichang's imperial concubine's protruding belly. The imperial concubine was so frightened by his actions that her entire body stiffened. She did not dare to move. Cold sweat broke out on her forehead, and her slender body trembled slightly. It was as if Hua Yuan was not using his finger but a sword to threaten her. Finally, when she realized that Hua Yuan hadn't harmed her, she heaved a long sigh of relief. She faintly felt as if she had escaped from death. But Sir knows this child isn't. Hua Yuan retracted his hand and took out a handkerchief from his sleeve to wipe his fingers. His movements were reserved and elegant, as if there was really something dirty on it. The Lord doesn't know, does he? He said indifferently. He doesn't know. The child you bear is his flesh and blood. Emperor concubine shut her mouth because she realized that Hua Yuan's eyes were flashing with murderous intent. If she said one more thing that she didn't dare to say, she didn't doubt that the poison in Hua Yuan's hands would enter her mouth. As if he was murmuring carelessly, Hua Yuan said, if only this child was a son. The Lord would have a successor. Emperor concubine forced a smile. Even if it's a son, he's just a bastard son. Lang Jun still has a legitimate young master. Because Enchanting's body was damaged, he could no longer impregnate women. In order to appease the officials who followed him, he adopted a son from a branch family. After many years, this young master had long been recognized by the officials. Everyone treated him as Enchanting's successor. Even if Emperor concubine Shichang gave birth to Enchanting's biological son, he would only be a bastard son. He wouldn't be able to compete with the adopted son and nominal son of the legitimate wife. When her child grew up, who knew if Enchanting would still be alive? After all, there was a lunatic like Hua Yuan on the inside and Jiang Pengji on the outside. Enchanting was sandwiched between them. No matter how you looked at it, he seemed like a short-lived creature. Even if Jiang Pengji didn't kill Enchanting, the young master would have grown up after many years. How could a young child be able to compete with him? Unless... Emperor concubine Shichang's mind spun. An extremely daring idea suddenly popped into her mind. Could it be? Her eyes widened and she took half a step back in fright. If the poison in Hua Yuan's hands wasn't prepared for Enchanting, then it was prepared for the young master. If the young master died, Enchanting would stay at the front lines and be controlled by Hua Yuan. Wouldn't his life and death be at Hua Yuan's disposal? As long as the two of them died, the child in her womb could only be used as a bargaining chip for Hua Yuan to seize power. As expected, Hua Yuan said, "Young master." Sighed Madam, the Lord values the child in your womb more. He has long had the intention to abolishly. Yes, this is indeed the Lord's intention. The young master is a stumbling block for the child in the Sighed Madam's womb. A stumbling block naturally had to be kicked out. Emperor concubine Shichang felt a chill in her heart. She didn't doubt Enchanting's ruthlessness. His intention to abolishly was probably true, but whether it was Enchanting's idea or Hua Yuan's own decision to poison the young master was debatable. Enchanting was shameless, but he wasn't brainless. He favored his biological son, but before his biological son grew up, he wouldn't kick out his backup stepson early. An unborn child, no one knew how talented he was and whether he could grow up safely. In summary, this was most likely Hua Yuan's own intention. How can a woman like me understand these things? Everything will be decided by the master. Hua Yuan laughed. That won't do. I'll need a little help from the side, madam. Emperor concubine Shichang's eyelids twitched violently. What kind of help? Hua Yuan leaned forward and whispered a few words into her ear. Emperor Concubine's body trembled slightly. Her eyes were filled with shock and fear. "Yes, sir, this matter." Her lips trembled and she wanted to refuse, but when she saw Hua Yuan's half-smiling eyes and the murderous intent deep in them, she had no choice but to give in. Everything will be arranged by the master." Emperor Concubine held her stomach with one hand and lowered her head. Hatred and indignation that could topple mountains and overturn seas rose in her heart. It was too unbearable and humiliating to be at someone's mercy. A conspiracy quietly took shape. 2 days later, a spring rain came. The mountain mist was thick and light, and the air was filled with the fragrance of soil and spring rain. The faint sound of horse hooves approached from afar. He said with a smile, "It's raining and we've already come across a wooden hut. Isn't that good?" When hunters went hunting in the mountains, those who were lucky could go and return on the same day. Those who were unlucky had to wait patiently in the mountains for a few days. For the sake of convenience, they would build this kind of temporary shelter, and passers-by could also rest here. The young man was in a good mood and did not feel that the rain was inappropriate. The attendant untied the wineskin from the back of the horse and handed it to the youth with both hands. "Young master, drink some wine to warm up your body, lest you catch a cold." The rain came suddenly. Even though everyone found shelter as fast as they could, they were still wet. Their clothes and hair were wet. The young man was of high status. If he fell sick because his attendants did not take good care of him, the attendants accompanying him would be in trouble. The attendants saw the young man take the wineskin and gulp it down. Only then did he feel relieved and turn around to fetch a clean set of clothes. Although the wooden hut was small, it had all the essentials. There was also a lot of dry firewood in the house, just enough to make a fire and boil water for the young man to bathe. The young man waved his hand and said, "Put the clothes aside. I'll change later. I don't want to move now." "Yes." The attendant put the clothes where the young man could reach out his hand and respectfully stepped back to guard nearby. He did not know whether it was because his alcohol tolerance was too poor, or because the wine today was especially fragrant, but the young man finished the wineskin in a few mouthfuls. His white jade-like cheeks were slightly tipsy, and the drunkenness rushed to his head. Not long after, his white jade-like cheeks were covered with a thin layer of red, and his whole body exuded the unique youthful spirit of a young man. He did not care at first, but soon noticed something strange. A familiar yet strange hot wave spread from inside to outside, making his skin hot and red. He could not help but raise his hand to loosen his clothes to cool down. This feeling, the young man was a little angry. "What's with this wine?" The attendant heard the commotion and rushed over. Hearing the young man's question, he was shocked. "Young master, wasn't this wine given by Master Hua Yuan?" The young man suddenly remembered something, and his expression became slightly unnatural. It turned out that this wine was found by the young man's concubine from somewhere and given to the young man. The young man knew that it was rare wine, so he gave it to Hua Yuan. Hua Yuan had been busy with the military rations recently and had not rested for several days. He was not in the mood to taste the wine, so he asked the young man to pack most of the wine back. In other words, this problematic wine should have been done by the young man's concubine. Thinking of this, the young man's cheeks burned like a burning cloud. He was ashamed, angry, and hateful. The women in the inner residence would really do anything to be favored. Fortunately, the teacher did not drink it. If he did, he might make a fool of himself. The young man's face turned pale, then green, then purple, and finally black. The attendant was a very discerning person. He did not know what had happened, but it did not prevent him from taking the opportunity to flatter the young man. He said flatteringly, "I see that the young master looks tired. Why don't you go in and rest?" The young man felt uncomfortable, but he nodded in agreement. Just as he was about to get up, his body suddenly froze on the spot. He did not know whether he should get up or not. It was very awkward. He had been dreaming since he was 13. 2 years ago, his father and Shui had prepared 2 intelligent and beautiful concubines for him to learn about human relationships. With these experiences, he naturally knew what the changes in his body meant. He immediately became even more embarrassed. He unnaturally tightened his legs. However, he was dressed more professionally today, so the reaction under his abdomen was slightly more obvious. The attendant's sharp eyes saw the small tent under his abdomen and understood. The young man was extremely embarrassed. He ran into the farmhouse as if he was escaping and slammed the door shut. This kind of farmhouse was a place for hunters to rest. The environment was simple, but it could shelter them from the wind and rain. There were guards outside, so ordinary hunters could not enter. The young man glanced at his abdomen, and his face became even more ashen. The attendant was a clever person. He asked in a low voice, "Young master, do you want to call for someone?" "We'll see. There's no need for now." The young man replied in a hoarse voice. Even his breath was hot. The accompanying attendants were all men in their teens or 20s. There were no women. Chapter 1665. Of course, this was not an absolute rule. It was just an unspoken rule. The young man had lived in such an environment since he was a child, so he naturally understood the hints of the servants. He asked someone to prepare cold water for him, intending to soak in it to suppress the rising desire in his body. However, a basin of cold water was not enough. He could not calm down no matter how he tossed and turned. Instead, he was so hot that his whole body was restless. The young man's body was the most sensitive. The tide of passion came violently and violently. The more he endured, the more pain he felt. This was not the way to go on. The young man's whole body was hot, and his consciousness was a little blurred. He seemed to vaguely hear the creaking sound of the wooden door being opened. "Who is it?" the young man shouted in a daze. The person's footsteps were light. As the person approached, a delicate fragrance that almost made him lose his mind surrounded him. The young man opened his eyes to look, but a soft and fragrant hand covered his eyes, making him see darkness. "Lang Jun," faintly, the person's sweet voice sounded in his ears. His sensitive earlobe was sucked by the other person's hot and wet mouth. The young man could not bear it. He raised his hand and pushed the person away, pressing her to the ground. He looked closer and saw that the other person was wearing a thin veil. Her delicate outline was hidden behind the veil, faintly discernible. Only her eyes were clear and moving. The other person seemed to be frightened by his actions. She opened her mouth slightly and let out a short scream. It was as if someone was using a soft feather to tickle the young man's heart, making him lose his mind. It was drizzling outside, but the passion in the room was intense. Not long after, there was a movement that made people blush. The young man, who was occupied by his instincts, did not notice that the person's lower abdomen was protruding, and she began to struggle and call for help. When the drizzle outside stopped, the passion in the room also came to an end. The sunset outside added a bit of a ghost. The young man woke up from his sleep and got up in a daze. He keenly noticed that something was wrong. There was another person's breathing next to him. He turned his head and saw a woman with a protruding lower abdomen and tearful cheeks lying next to him. At first glance, this person's profile was slightly familiar. The young man's memories before he fell asleep quickly came back, and the memory of the passion also flashed in front of his eyes. The young man was shocked and shivered. He recalled the appearance of the woman before her hair was scattered. It was clearly a married woman. Then he looked at her lower abdomen. The youth's face was like an overturned palette with all kinds of colors. At this time, the woman moaned and opened her eyes. When she saw the youth's appearance, she screamed and sat up. She covered her stomach with one hand and grabbed the scattered clothes to cover her body with the other. Because of this, the young man also saw the woman's appearance clearly, and it was as if he had been struck by lightning. This person, Wasn't this person his adoptive father and Chui's side wife, the Empress concubine from Xichang, his adoptive mother? Unfilial son. How could you do such a despicable thing? Are you worthy of your father? Without waiting for the youth to come back to his senses, Princess Concubine of Xichang cried and slapped him. At that moment, Princess Concubine Xichang's maidservant barged in. She was scared out of her wits by the situation. Anyone with a discerning eye would know what had happened to the two people in the room. One was Chui's concubine, and she was pregnant. The other was Chui's adopted son, currently the rightful heir. These two were mother and son in name, but now they were actually together. Princess Concubine Xichang was in so much pain that she wanted to die. Her hair was messy, and her exposed skin was bruised. It was obvious that she had been forced by her stepson. Because of the maidservant, the youth did not even have the chance to make up for it. There was only one thought in his mind: it's over. Ah! My stomach. Princess Concubine clutched her stomach, her face pale. Both the maidservant and the youth were scared out of their wits. The maidservant hurriedly wanted to find someone to take a look at Princess Concubine and protect the child in her womb. Nothing could happen to her. The scene was in chaos. The youth's servants had also been attracted by the maidservant's movements. Looking at the chaotic scene, the youth realized that he had missed a great opportunity to salvage the situation. If people knew that he had sex with his father's concubine, and that he had clearly forced himself on her while drunk, he would definitely be finished. Even if he was innocent. At that moment, the youth had already realized that this was a plot against him. He had fallen into someone's trap. Unfortunately, there were witnesses and material evidence. Even if he had mouths all over his body, he could not clear his name. At that moment, if the youth had half the decisiveness and viciousness of the mentally ill Hua Yuan, he could have killed Princess Concubine Xichang and her maidservants. Then, he could come up with an excuse. As long as there was no evidence, no one would know what he had done to Princess Concubine Xichang. Although the servants knew, they were all the youth's people, so it was easy to clean them up. However, the youth was not Hua Yuan. He did not have the decisiveness to grasp this last opportunity. The price was that this matter would reach his master, Hua Yuan. If Hua Yuan knew, that meant that his adoptive father, and Chui, would know sooner or later. Sir, this student is really innocent. The youth could not defend himself. He could only hope that Hua Yuan would believe him. Hua Yuan said angrily, "Innocent? Bullying a concubine's mother is innocent? How many people saw what you did?" The youth's face was pale. Hua Yuan said, "I've already dealt with most of the blabbermouths who knew. This matter should be handled by the Lord herself." The youth panicked when he heard this. If Enchui knew, he would definitely die. "Sir, why won't you listen to me? You raised me personally. How can you not know what kind of person I am? How can your student be worse than a beast?" The youth knelt on the ground and cried. This student was really set up. That pot of wine was drugged by the lowly servant in the backyard. Also, the concubine mother appeared at a very suspicious time. It must have been her. "You're so stupid." Hua Yuan rebuked him angrily. "She is pregnant with the Lord's son. Even if she sees you as a thorn in her side, she has to wait until after the baby is born. What benefit does she get from setting you up now? But because of you, the fetus in her womb is showing signs of instability. If it weren't for the doctor's superb medical skills and her good foundation, this fetus would definitely not be able to survive. Anyone with a discerning eye can see that no matter who schemes against you, she would never scheme against you. Not only can you not get away with this excuse, you even have a guilty conscience." The youth had already lost his mind. His mind was a mess, and he trembled all over. Hua Yuan said, "Your attendants said that they heard a woman crying for help in the room. They went up to investigate but were scolded by you. There are witnesses and material evidence. How do you expect me to believe your words? Did you bully your concubine mother after drinking or were you set up?" What I think is not important. What's important is what outsiders think and what the Lord thinks. I will tell the Lord the truth and see what the Lord decides. The youth's lips turned pale. Sir. Father, will never forgive this student. I don't want to die yet. Chapter 1666. Because of Hua Yuan's refusal, the youth could only leave anxiously. Before he left, he even looked back 3 times. Hua Yuan watched him leave but said nothing. His expression was solemn. The youth could only give up for now. Sir, what should we do now? Xichang's Empress concubine thought that Hua Yuan would poison the youth to death quickly. She had never expected that he would do nothing even after several days. As long as the youth did not die, Xichang's Empress concubine would live in fear. She was afraid that Hua Yuan would abandon her and become a useless pawn. She had followed Hua Yuan's instructions and walked down a path of no return. She schemed that the youth had an affair with her. If the youth and Enshui did not die, she would be the one to die when the child in her womb was born. With Enshui's temperament, how could he tolerate his concubine being tainted by an adopted son? If Enshui found out that the child in her womb was not his, Xichang's Empress concubine would probably wish for death. She was like a drowning person, clutching tightly to the straw in her hands before she died. Xichang's Empress concubine held her obvious belly with one hand and carefully leaned against the table, afraid that something would happen to the child. I have done everything according to Sir's instructions. There is no turning back. If Sir abandons me now, I really do not know what to do. Her face was filled with tenderness. One could not help but reach out to smooth her frowning brows. Of course, this person did not include Hua Yuan. This lunatic had a heart of stone. I know. Hua Yuan said coldly. He had no intention of giving a precise reply. Sir, I am worried that a long delay will bring trouble. Although the young master is young, he is still a child personally raised by Sir and Enshui. If he is not eliminated quickly, he will be a disaster. Xichang's Empress concubine did not forget to flatter Hua Yuan. Also, my pregnancy has been affected because of that matter. If he takes this opportunity to harm me, I will be so worried that I will not be able to sleep at night. She had only dared to plot against the youth according to Hua Yuan's instructions because the appearance of the fetus was already stable. In order to pretend to be more realistic, some of the struggling movements were inevitably more violent. The youth had also lost his rationality under the influence of the drug, and his movements were rough. That young and strong body made her suffer greatly, and even her stomach began to feel uncomfortable. Only then did she panic. Under Hua Yuan's threat, she had already thrown caution to the wind. However, if the youth didn't die, she would never be at ease. She could only urge Hua Yuan to take action again and again. How could Hua Yuan not know what she was thinking? Hua Yuan's lips curled into a cold smile. There's no rush. It's almost there. Emperor concubine Xichang pressed. What do you mean by not in a hurry? How soon is it? As long as he lives, I will live in fear. If she could, she would love nothing more than for Hua Yuan to pinch the young man's chin and pour poison into him. That way, all troubles would end once and for all, and there would be no future troubles. Hua Yuan snorted and did not answer. Xichang's princess concubine saw his unhappy expression and immediately came to her senses. She regretted being too impulsive. I'm just worried. I'm not doubting you, she explained dryly, trying to salvage some of the situation so that Hua Yuan wouldn't be in a bad mood and pour all his dirty tricks on her. There's no need to worry. Hua Yuan's expression softened slightly as he said, the time is ripe. This answer put Xichang's princess concubine's worried heart back to its original place. She and Hua Yuan had the same interests. At present, they were two grasshoppers tied to the same rope. If anything happened to her, Hua Yuan would not be able to escape. Reality proved that her worries were unfounded. Hua Yuan, that maniac, would definitely be able to scheme against anyone. The young man was still too young. In terms of skill and scheming, how could he compare to the scheming maniac Hua Yuan? Xichang's princess concubine thought that Hua Yuan had not taken action, but that was not the case. Hua Yuan had taken action. However, he did not harm the young man's body, but his mind. He suppressed his will and destroyed his psychological defenses, forcing the young man to lose all will to live in his panic. Finally, he consumed the poison that Hua Yuan had gotten someone to deliver to the young man. On this day, the night was dark. The moon was hidden behind the dark clouds, and the stars were dim. Hua Yuan stood under the window in a daze with his clothes draped over his shoulders. He was not in the mood to sleep. There was a letter on the table beside him. This letter had been delivered by the young man's attendant several hours ago. Because it was not personally delivered to Hua Yuan only saw it after he was done with all his work. The contents of the letter were not very useful. It was just the last cry of a desperate and dying young beast. When all was silent, a flurry of hurried footsteps could be heard from afar. When the other person ran closer, Hua Yuan could still hear the other person's heavy breathing. He looked at the approaching person with an indifferent expression, his brows slightly furrowed. Hua Yuan asked unhappily, "What's the matter?" The servants in the residence were all well-mannered. They served Hua Yuan carefully and would not run loudly under normal circumstances. However, at this moment, they did not care about the rules. One could imagine how sensational the news brought by the servant was. Master, something bad has happened." The servant caught his breath and said breathlessly, "The young master is dead." Dead? Yes, the news just came. The young master committed suicide by ingesting poison. He's already gone. The servant trembled as he finished speaking. His eyes stared unblinkingly at Hua Yuan. His muscles tensed as he moved forward to catch the grieving Hua Yuan. Unexpectedly, Hua Yuan's reaction was beyond the servant's expectations. He thought that based on the deep relationship between Hua Yuan and the young master, even if he did not faint from grief, he would be horrified upon hearing this. However, Hua Yuan's expression did not change at all. It was as if the one who died was not his student, but an insignificant child beggar. He did not even ask how he died. It was as if Hua Yuan had already expected this and had been waiting for this news to come. The servant was frightened by his own guess. He hurriedly lowered his head, afraid that Hua Yuan would see an expression that he should not have. "I already know. You may leave and prepare the clothes." The young man's death was no different from an earthquake to others, but it was within Hua Yuan's expectations. His indifferent gaze turned to the letter on the table, and the corners of his lips curled up in silent mockery. Stupid. This was Hua Yuan's evaluation of the young man's death. If he was not stupid and weak, how could the young man not know who the real person was? Before he died, he even wrote to him. His words were sincere and every sentence was filled with remorse. He said that he had let down Hua Yuan's many years of teaching. Now that he was gone, he asked him not to grieve for an incompetent and unfilial student. The victim's suicide note to the murderer was so sincere. It was really ridiculous. He's destined not to live. It's clean now that he's gone. Hua Yuan felt a little regretful. The young man was taught by Hua Yuan, but his ambition was not big enough. Chapter 1667. Without Princess Xichang, Shui would not kill the youth immediately out of consideration for the greater good. Because Shui needed a stable heir. If the youth lay low, he might have a chance to make a comeback in the future. Unfortunately, he was still too young. Faced with such mental pressure, the only way he could think of was to commit suicide. When Hua Yuan arrived, the youth's corpse had already been put away. He had changed into clean clothes and had light makeup on his face. Now that his eyes were closed, he did not look like he was dead, but more like he had fallen asleep. When the sun rose, he would open his pure and lively eyes, and Shui's officials who were guarding the rear crawled out of bed when they heard the news. Who killed young master? A hot-tempered old official dressed in plain clothes with a white belt around his waist rushed over with a murderous aura. The moment he arrived, he stared fiercely at Princess Xichang. Could it be you, Vixen? The old official had heard of the scandal a while ago, but he would not abandon the young master he had watched grow up for a fallen country's concubine. Even if it was a scandal, it was the woman's fault. Abandoning Princess Xichang to protect the young master was a matter of course in his eyes. These days, he had been thinking about how to save the youth's life, trying to find fault with Princess Xichang and push all the blame onto her. If that did not work, he could only take the risk and send a suicide squad to kill Princess Xichang. Unexpectedly, before he could do anything, the young master had already committed suicide by poisoning himself. Looking at the youth lying on the bed and seeing that his chest was no longer heaving, he immediately felt sorrow. Princess Xichang saw the old official draw his sword and was about to kill her. She was so frightened that her face paled and she screamed. Hua Yuan grabbed the old official's wrist and used a little force to make him release the sword hilt in pain. He said angrily, "Have you had enough?" The old official said relentlessly, "This vixen must die today." For some reason, ever since he had stepped into the house where the youth had committed suicide, Hua Yuan had felt a tightness in his chest. He did not know where this feeling came from, but it had pushed his rationality to the brink of collapse. He was easily angered and irritable. The old official had drawn his sword and caused trouble at this time, directly infuriating Hua Yuan. He pushed the old official away and almost lost his footing. It was as if his brain had lost blood, causing his vision to flicker. Scram! Hua Yuan angrily rebuked the old official. The old official said, "Young master was plotted against by that B*TCH and forced to his death. Even if I have to risk my life, I will eliminate her." Xichang's Empress concubine screamed as she hid behind her maidservant. When she heard the old official's scolding, she could not help but agree. The old man's words were absolutely right. Wasn't Hua Yuan the B*TCH he was referring to? The room was in chaos, and people rushed over to stop the two of them. Some stopped the old official, and some stopped Hua Yuan. Regardless of whether the young man's death was honorable or not, the deceased was more important. His body had just cooled down, so they could not make a ruckus here and disturb the deceased. Moreover, it was really inappropriate for the two of them to fight in front of the corpse. "I told you to scram." Hua Yuan raised his hand and waved his sleeve, brushing away the people who tried to stop him. Before he could take half a step forward, he felt a sharp pain in the depths of his mind. The scenery in front of him blurred and turned scarlet. In Hua Yuan's eyes, the figures around him were all people made of blood without facial features. Their mouths opened and closed as they said something. One voice became two, two became four, four became eight. Gradually, the voices from all directions became thousands, interfering with his hearing. Hua Yuan's feet felt weak as he stumbled and fell forward. Fortunately, someone was quick enough to pull him up, or he would have crashed to the ground. Everyone was shocked by this turn of events. Even the old official who wanted to take Xichang's Empress concubine's life was distracted. When they came over, they saw that Hua Yuan's face was abnormally pale. They thought that he was suppressing his grief, but they did not expect him to release his emotions. Everyone thought of the teacher-student relationship between Hua Yuan and the young man and felt very sad. They did not expect Hua Yuan to have such crazy looks. "Stop arguing. All of you, stop arguing. All of you, scram. Scram." Hua Yuan pushed away the people who approached him and shouted at the top of his lungs. His eyes were bloodshot, and he looked deranged. "Young master has passed away. My condolences, military advisor. The dead cannot be remembered. Scram. All of you, scram." Hua Yuan held his head in pain with one hand and pointed at the crowd with the other, telling them to stop talking. His head was really about to explode. His head hurt like there was a hand stirring his brain and crushing his skull. He was in so much pain that he was on the verge of death. After an unknown amount of time, Hua Yuan finally regained some of his senses. He knelt on the ground. His usual elegant demeanor was completely gone. All that was left was a strange madness and a dejection that came from his soul. Everyone thought that he had lost his composure because he could not take the blow. They did not expect Hua Yuan's next move to almost make their eyes pop out of their sockets. With a swoosh, he unsheathed his sword. Someone was so frightened that he shouted, "Military advisor, you mustn't." It turned out that Hua Yuan had taken advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention to pull out the sword from his opponent's waist and pretended to commit suicide. Judging from his expression and posture, he was clearly ready to die. In the nick of time, someone stepped forward to snatch his sword, but he was still a step too late. A long but not deep wound appeared on his neck. Seeing this, the others took the opportunity to rush forward and stop Hua Yuan, afraid that he would continue to seek death when he recovered. If Hua Yuan died, Shui at the front lines would explode on the spot. Why are you stopping me?" Hua Yuan roared these words. His cheeks were covered in tears. Someone said, "The young master has passed away. My condolences, military advisor." How could the Lord's trusted aide commit suicide to follow the young master after he passed away? Not to mention that the young master had not died honorably. He had committed suicide to escape punishment after defiling his stepmother. "I am responsible for the young master's death. I deserve to die. Don't stop me." How could anyone take his words seriously? Instead, they thought that Hua Yuan was a loyal person. They did not dare to let go and let him seek death. Hua Yuan wanted to break down even more now. He was the one who had caused the death of his student. No, to be more precise, he had personally destroyed his student after he had lost his mind. He was the one who deserved to die. Hua Yuan did not expect that he had lost his mind to be this serious. The last person to appear had killed the other people in a deranged manner. If not for the fact that Hua Yuan's true body was special and could not be erased or replaced, he would probably have died. He had been in a daze previously. Today, he finally appeared, but he did not expect his student to die. Hua Yuan knew that he had committed a grave sin. He could only confess to his student after he died. He did not expect that no one would believe him even after he spoke the truth. These brainless idiots even stopped him from committing suicide. Was he committing suicide? He was doing justice on behalf of the heavens. As long as he died, and this body died, that dangerous person would not appear again. "Let go of me." "No. Military advisor, you must calm down." "Military advisor, we are also very sad that the young master has died. But you still have to help the Lord achieve hegemony. You cannot commit suicide." Xicheng's Empress concubine, she suddenly felt that it was not unreasonable for Hua Yuan to be so arrogant. Look, in order to clear himself of suspicion, this person really used all his strength. The wound on his neck was still bleeding. If the crowd had not stopped him just now, Hua Yuan would have probably slit his throat when he recommended himself. Xicheng's Empress concubine watched the show in a daze. Chapter 1668. Opportunities were fleeting. They could not be missed. Hua Yuan's main body took advantage of his student's death to temporarily regain consciousness. He had wanted to commit suicide and end all his troubles, but he did not expect to be stopped by the crowd. How could he fight against so many people alone? After a series of struggles, his sword was taken away, and his mouth was gagged when he tried to bite his tongue. All his energy was in vain, and he ended up in a sorry state. He was filled with grief and indignation. He finally understood what it meant to be begging for death but unable to live. Hua Yuan only wanted to die. Why did everyone act as if he wanted their lives? Why were they fighting so hard? After a stalemate, Hua Yuan was exhausted. His arms and legs were weak and powerless, and he could only gasp for air through his mouth. Seeing that he did not have the energy to court death, the others secretly sighed in relief. Even though they did not like Hua Yuan, and Shui would lose an arm if Hua Yuan died. Their interests would be tied to Shui's. To put it simply, protecting Hua Yuan was protecting their own interests. Naturally, they had to try their best to stop him. You guys are unreasonable. Hua Yuan's head was spinning. Waves of dizziness and nausea washed over him. This feeling was too familiar. Before he lost consciousness, Hua Yuan felt a pair of murky red eyes open in the darkness. The owner of this pair of eyes was looking at him coldly. There was no sadness, no joy, no shock, no anger, but Hua Yuan felt as if he was being stared at by the nine hells. No, perhaps it was not a hallucination. The owner of this pair of eyes could really drag people into hell when he went crazy. Hua Yuan's heart trembled. All the hair on his body stood up in protest. He knew that person was about to wake up. The advisor has fainted. Someone shouted. Only then did the crowd realize that Hua Yuan's face was pale, and his eyes were closed as he leaned back. He looked more like a corpse than the one on the bed. The crowd pressed him down, called into Hua Yuan's ear, and sent for a doctor. After all this, they were all drenched in sweat. It was as if they had run several kilometers with a 100-kilogram sandbag on their backs. Heaven did not disappoint those who worked hard. Their efforts were still useful. Before the doctor arrived, Hua Yuan slowly woke up and opened his eyes. Someone said, "Military advisor, the current situation is critical, and we still need you to put in effort to plan. How can you abandon the Lord for the young master?" The old official who had wanted to kill Shichang's princess concubine had also calmed down. He said a few words and did not continue fighting. They sincerely persuaded Hua Yuan to give up on the idea of dying, but the person in question had a look that said, "Are you all pigs? I'm fine." Hua Yuan propped himself up on his weak legs and noticed that there was some sort of sticky liquid on his neck. He raised his hand to wipe it off and brought it before his eyes to take a look. It was actually bright red blood. He curled the corners of his lips mockingly and said indifferently, "The young master has just passed away. Prepare the funeral rites and send someone to inform the Lord. The cause of young master's death is not honorable. To the public, we will say that he suddenly died of a serious illness." When everyone saw that Hua Yuan had regained his composure, they could not help but feel relieved. Even if Hua Yuan's expression was deathly still, it was still better than drawing his sword and seeking death at the slightest provocation. As long as he didn't want to kill himself and sacrifice himself for his master, everything was fine. "Yes. Yes, Your Majesty." Just like that, the curtains fell on the farce. A doctor hurried over to treat the wound on Hua Yuan's neck. Hua Yuan did not move at all, allowing the doctor to do as he pleased. He was like a lifeless porcelain doll. When the doctor saw this, he thought that Hua Yuan had failed to sacrifice himself for his master and was disheartened. He sighed and said, "You must avoid eating for the next few days. Your wound must not come into contact with any filth to prevent bad luck from entering your body and causing your wound to swell and rot. I will prescribe some medicine for you. Take it regularly and you will get better." Hua Yuan asked him, "Is the wound deep?" The doctor replied, "It's not deep, but the location is dangerous." Hua Yuan remained silent when he heard that. However, the emotions that flashed in his eyes made the doctor's heart palpitate. "You may leave. I want to be alone and rest. I still have to arrange the young master's funeral rites later." Hua Yuan chased him away. The doctor's lips quivered, but he did not say anything to dissuade him. He could only leave quietly. The moment the doctor left, Hua Yuan flicked his sleeves and knocked everything in sight to the ground. His elegant and handsome face was filled with malevolence. "I'm not a lunatic, I'm not. I am me." He suppressed his roar in his throat. Even though his voice was not loud, it was extremely penetrating and infectious, causing the hair of those who heard it to stand on end. Unfortunately, he was the only one in the room. No one else could hear him. The chaotic night was dispersed by the morning sun. The news of the young master's sudden death from an acute illness spread everywhere as if it had wings. This news naturally reached Enchanting, who was at the front lines. Enchanting received 2 letters. One was a normal funeral announcement, and the other was a secret letter that Hua Yuan had kept under wraps for a long time. This secret letter described in detail how the young master had bullied his pregnant concubine mother, causing her to have an unstable pregnancy and almost losing her child. Apart from that, Hua Yuan also added the truth of the young master's death. He had not died a sudden death. Instead, he had committed suicide out of fear after doing something wrong. The 2 letters arrived one after the other. When he read the first letter, Enchanting felt grief and indescribable joy at the same time. His adopted son had died, and the stumbling block that had been weighing on his heart was gone. No one could stop his biological son from ascending to the throne. When he read the second secret letter, Enchanting's anger shot through the roof. The veins on his forehead swelled up and down, as if there were green snakes coiling around his forehead. He was so angry that his hands were shaking, his face was ashen, and his chest rose and fell rapidly. He wanted nothing more than to dig out his stepson and whip his corpse. He had bullied and humiliated his concubine mother while he was away, causing her to have an unstable pregnancy and almost have a miscarriage, and Shui did not know that he had actually raised an ingrate who could not be tamed. He had actually done such a shameless, treacherous thing. Well done. These 3 words were almost squeezed out through his molars. When he thought about how his woman, a woman who was pregnant with his child, had been tainted by his stepson, an intense feeling of humiliation surged into his heart, causing his hatred to shoot to the heavens. Committing suicide out of fear of punishment? That was too easy for this brat. At the very least, he should be executed by 1,000 cuts. Despite his anger, Enchanting could not spread the word about what his stepson had done. Similarly, he could not reveal the truth of his death to the public. Not only could he not, but he also had to clean up the other party's mess and ensure his reputation after his death. If he did not do this, the outside world would inevitably speculate that his stepson's death had been incited by Enchanting, that he had harmed his stepson in order to clear the way for his biological son. This would inevitably leave behind a negative impression that Enchanting was vicious and merciless, that he would do anything to achieve his goals. More importantly, the world would also know that Enchanting had been cuckolded by his stepson. For a man, being cuckolded was the most unbearable humiliation. For the sake of his own reputation, Enchanting could not act on impulse. At most, he would use some small methods to vent his anger behind the scenes. Chapter 1669. After all, he was someone who had climbed to the position of a feudal lord. Enchanting had his flaws, but he also had his merits. He couldn't be killed with a single blow. Not to mention what the unfilial son had done that violated human ethics, the impact his death had on Enchanting was not something that could be summed up by being cuckolded. With his death, Enchanting had no heir. His only bloodline was still germinating in the belly of the Xichang princess. The officials didn't know whether the child was a boy or a girl, or how talented he was. Everything was unknown. They couldn't help but feel anxious. Enchanting had an heir. This was the only advantage he had over Jiang Pengji. Now that the heir was dead, and Enchanting was much older than Jiang Pengji, his remaining advantage was gone. Thinking of this, Enchanting felt pain and sorrow. He couldn't help but pull out the corpse of the Nanman tribe that he had exterminated. If the Nanman hadn't rebelled and overthrown Nansheng, he, Enchanting, was a man with both a son and a daughter. How could he have fallen to such a miserable state? When he thought of the scene of his children losing their lives in the Nanman tribe, he was so grief-stricken that he couldn't speak. Hatred grew wildly in his heart like weeds. Perhaps his luck had been too bad recently. Bad things happened to Enchanting one after another. First, 200,000 dawn of rations were plundered by Jiang Pengji. Then, his stepson bullied his stepmother and committed suicide to escape punishment. Following that, Hua Yuan almost killed himself for his master. This wasn't the end. Their enemies also increased their attacks in tacit understanding, causing Enchui to be badly battered. The rations issue hadn't been completely resolved. The news of the rations shortage spread like wildfire. The morale of the soldiers at the grassroots level was greatly shaken. Enchui was still a scumbag. He looked for Lu Zheng when he needed something. Little did he know that Lu Zheng only wanted to curse. Did he really think he was a fairy? Could he conjure rations out of thin air? If he could, he would be the first to conjure rations to drown Enchui. Lu Zheng's anger burned fiercely, but anger couldn't change anything. The crisis before him was getting more and more intense. Therefore, Lu Zheng could only give Enchui an ultimatum. He wanted Enchui to urge Hua Yuan to replenish the rations as soon as possible. If he couldn't, everyone would starve to death together. How infuriating. Even a cup of cold water couldn't extinguish Lu Zheng's anger. Too many things had taken up Lu Zheng's energy recently, so he forgot that his schoolmate was a troublemaker. Jiang Pengji and Lu Zheng were both students from Langyi Academy. They were alumni of the same school, so they were naturally in the same camp. With a little effort, Jiang Pengji could make the relationship between Enchui and Lu Zheng, which was on the verge of collapse, take a turn for the worse, or even completely collapse. From what she had seen, Enchui was not a broad-minded person. His position and opinions were different from Lu Zheng's, and the two of them often had conflicts. This could be seen from the fact that Enchui had placed Hua Yuan in an important position over the past 2 years, while Lu Zheng had been given the cold shoulder. Enchui had a lot of opinions about Lu Zheng. If Jiang Pengji added fuel to the fire and sowed discord between the two, she might even be able to use Enchui to force Lu Zheng into a desperate situation. Lu Zheng was not someone who would sit and wait for death. If that really happened, he might even jump ship at the last minute. Hence, when Wei Ci saw his lord bending over the table and writing a letter to his classmate, Lu Zheng, his heart was filled with mixed feelings. Because Jiang Pengji did not hide her letter from Wei Ci could see the lingering sentences in the letter. Almost every word recalled the time when he was studying at Langyi Academy. Jiang Pengji used simple but intimate words to exaggerate the friendship between them into 100%. Those who did not know the truth would wonder if Lu Zheng and Jiang Pengji had such a close relationship when they were young. Wei Ci recalled Enchui's temperament and felt more and more sorry for Lu Zheng. How many lifetimes of bad luck did this man have to have a lord like Enchui and an opponent like Jiang Pengji? Oh. Before he sympathized with Enchui, Wei Ci also had to sympathize with himself in his previous life. He and Lu Zheng were in the same boat. Based on Xiaoyin's temperament, it's impossible for him to accept my lord's invitation. Wei Ci could not help but remind him. Lu Zheng was a petty and vengeful fellow. She had offended him greatly, so it would not be easy to recruit him in the future. Enchui's temperament is very different from Lu Zheng's. The two of them are not on the same path. Even if my lord did not interfere, sooner or later, there would be discord between them. Why did my lord go through all this trouble? Not all lords in this world are as broad-minded and perceptive as I am, Jiang Pengji said narcissistically. Jiang Pengji said narcissistically, Enchui has never been a gentleman. He doesn't walk the same path as Xiaoyin. I wanted to use Enchui to force Xiaoyin into a corner and force him to leave Enchui sooner. Time has dragged on for too long. I don't have the time to waste with Enchui, this clown. Coincidentally, there was a problem on Enchui's side. It was the perfect time to make them fall apart in one go. Don't you think that Xiaoyin is too much of an eyesore? Wei Ci was speechless. If Lu Zheng heard Jiang Pengji's words, he would definitely cry, wouldn't he? Jiang Pengji continued, you and I both know Xiaoyin's ability. Letting him stay by Enchui's side won't do us any good. Wei Ci coughed softly and said, although it's the truth, my lord's way of expressing it is still unacceptable. To be honest, Wei Ci had been rather jealous of Lu Zheng for a period of time. Lu Zheng could approach her without any ill feelings and talk to her freely, but Wei Ci could only stand outside the safety line and watch. He could only experience all kinds of bitterness on his own. No one could confide in him. Jiang Pengji didn't know what Wei Ci was thinking about. She only smiled and said, "There's only Zi Xiao by my side. Xiaoyin isn't here." Can you still repeat what he said? Even if he knows what I said, he can't have any opinions. In the future, I will be his master and he will be my subject. Wei Ci said, "This is a good ending." In the previous life, Lu Zheng's ending was too tragic. If this life was perfect, it could make up for the regrets of the previous life. If Lu Zheng knew about the conversation between the adulterous couple, he would most likely be so angry that he would jump up in rage. Was there anyone more shameless than them in this world? As it turned out, there wasn't. Jiang Pengji was a textbook scoundrel. No one could compare to her. When Lu Zheng saw the letter that Jiang Pengji had written for him appear in Shui's hands, there was only one thought in his mind. That bastard was up to mischief again. It wasn't that Jiang Pengji hadn't written letters to Lu Zheng before. Not only did she write them herself, but she also sent Fang Ji to persuade him. Unfortunately, Lu Zheng's beliefs were firm and unwavering. This time, Jiang Pengji gave him a strong dose of medicine. The contents of the letter were as ambiguous as one could imagine. More importantly, this letter appeared when Shui had just suffered a defeat. Shui's expression was as solemn as ink. Does Xiaoyin have any explanation? Faced with Shui's questioning, Lu Zheng was furious. It's just a clumsy method of sowing discord. It's not like it hasn't happened in the past. Is my lord going to doubt my loyalty based on this alone? Lu Zheng couldn't be bothered to defend himself. Every time Shui doubted him, his good impression of Shui wore away. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.